Journey through North. 37 AC. Theon Stark Pav. 10 moons. 10 moons since Janos and I rode out from Winterfell, leaving Mother's worried face in the courtyard. A year was her condition, a bargain struck with honeyed words and promises of swift return. But this journey was more than a mere survey of the North's progress. With each league we covered, with each lord we greeted, I was about a more secret task. In the heart of ancient keeps, beneath the watchful eyes of the heart trees, the ward stones were placed, a silent network of protection spreading across our lands. All the major holdfasts now held this hidden defense, all save Bear Island, its stark silhouette rising from the churning gray of the Bay of Ice as our longship pitched and rolled. My mind, however, was not on the spray of the sea or the cries of gulls. It was fixed on the slow, deliberate changes taking root in the north. The canal, a raw gash in the earth, was nearing a fifth of its completion, a testament to the sheer grit of our people. Moat Cailin, a ruin for centuries, would rise again with the spring thaw, its strategic importance magnified by the lifeblood of the new waterway. And a quiet hope stirred within me as I considered the slow increase in our numbers. Soap, a simple thing, had stemmed the tide of sickness. Whispers of work and a healthier life had drawn back some of those who had sought their fortunes south, their return a quiet strengthening of our lands. Bear Island. The final ward stone awaited. Janos' elbow dug playfully into my ribs, jolting me from my reverie. Still brooding, brother, he teased, a familiar grin on his face. I was thinking, I retorted, though my heart wasn't truly in the playful jab. My mind had been wrestling with the weight of our secrets and the future of the North. Thinking about how to make the snow fall upwards, no doubt, Janos chuckled. He followed my gaze towards the horizon. Well, stop your deep thoughts for a moment. Look. My eyes focused on the coastline of Bear Island as it drew nearer. But instead of the expected rugged cliffs and the stoic banner of House Mormont, a scene of chaos unfolded. Longships, bearing the unmistakable marks of reavers, lean, swift vessels with menacing figureheads, were assaulting the shore. Flames licked at what appeared to be small fishing villages, and the sounds of battle, the clash of steel, the shouts of men, and the terrified screams of the innocent, drifted across the water. Reavers, Janos breathed, his usual jovial demeanor instantly replaced by a grim alertness. Attacking Bear Island. A knot of cold dread tightened in my stomach. This was unexpected and deeply troubling. Janos, I barked, my voice sharp with urgency. Tell the guards. Prepare for attack. Now. And order the captain to make all haste towards the shore. We need to reach them, and quickly. My hand instinctively went to the hilts of Jon and Theo beneath my tunic. This was large raiding party. The scale of the attack suggested something far more organized, far more dangerous. The moment the ship scraped against the sandy shore, before the anchor even fully bit, I was moving. Janos was a heartbeat behind me, our guards surging forward in a disciplined wave. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burning wood and the metallic tang of blood. Reavers, their faces masked in savage glee, were hacking at fleeing villagers, their axes rising and falling with brutal efficiency. Janos and I moved as one, years of training and an unspoken understanding guiding our every step. He took the left, his bastard sword, Winter's Bite, a whirlwind of steel, cleaving through raiders with brutal force. I moved to the right, Jon and Theo flashing in deadly arcs, their enchanted edges biting deep. We kept a constant awareness of each other, a silent dance of death against the chaotic backdrop of the raid. A reaver lunged at Janos from the side, but I was there in an instant, Theo intercepting the blow while on found its mark. Another tried to flank me, only to be met by Janos' furious assault. We were the teeth of the wolf, tearing into the pack of jackals despoiling northern lands. The chaos of battle swirled around me, a dizzying vortex of clashing steel and desperate cries. I caught sight of the woman with the spiked mace. I watched in a strange daze as she brought the brutal weapon down on a reaver's head with a sickening thwack, the force of the blow sending the man sprawling. Without a pause, she whirled, her green eyes locking onto two more raiders charging towards her. She moved with a primal grace, a furious bear protecting her cubs. My own body moved on instinct, parrying wild swings and delivering swift strikes with On and Theo. But my focus was fractured, my mind captivated by the raw power and fierce beauty of the warrior before me. Theon. Gods damn you, Theon, fight. Janos' voice, laced with exasperation and a hint of fear for my well-being, finally pierced through my stupor. He blocked a clumsy axe blow aimed at my back. What are you gaping at? We're in the thick of it. I can't help it, I murmured, my eyes still locked on the woman as she roared a challenge and smashed her mace into another reaver's chest. Look at her, Janos. She fights like a storm. A storm that will leave you bleeding in the sand if you don't pay attention. He snapped, shoving me back from a lunging reaver. Focus, brother. We can admire fierce women later, after we've sent these kraken kissers back to the sea. Despite his urgent words, my gaze kept drifting back to her. The way her brown hair whipped around her face with each brutal swing, the unwavering ferocity in her green eyes as she met the gaze of her enemies, the sheer, untamed power in every movement, it was mesmerizing. She was a force of nature, unleashed and terrifyingly beautiful. Even as the last of the reavers fell silent, their bodies littering the blood-soaked sand, my eyes remained on her. She stood amidst the carnage, her chest heaving, the spiked mace dripping crimson, her gaze sweeping the battlefield with a possessive, protective fury. I couldn't look away. Northern soldiers, their faces grim but victorious, were now assisting the shaken small folk, offering water and tending to the wounded. Lord Theon Mormont, a man built like the granite cliffs of his island, his face etched with worry but his eyes holding a flicker of gratitude, approached us, his son and the fierce woman I had watched in battle flanking him. I found myself still somewhat dazed, my gaze lingering on the woman, her brown hair streaked with sweat and blood, the spiked mace still clutched firmly in her hand. Janos nudged me sharply in the ribs, a knowing smirk on his face. Gods, Theon, try not to look quite so lovesick. Lord Mormont is addressing you. I blinked, forcing my attention away from the captivating warrior. Lord Mormont stood before us, his expression grave. Lord Stark, he said, his voice rough but sincere, and your brother. Your arrival was timely. We are in your debt. Beside him, a younger man, his features bearing a resemblance to his father but less weathered, offered a curt nod. Brian Mormont, he introduced himself, his gaze assessing. Then, her green eyes, sharp and direct, met mine. Diana Mormont, she stated, her voice firm and unwavering, the same fierce intensity I had witnessed in battle still radiating from her. Lord Mormont, I replied, finally finding my voice, offering a respectful bow, and introducing to ourselves to Brian Mormont and Diana Mormont, Theon Stark, and this is my brother, Janos. We were fortunate to arrive when we did. We are glad we could be of assistance. Janos echoed my greeting with a more boisterous nod. Lord Mormont gestured towards the path leading inland. The keep is not far. You have fought bravely alongside us. Come, we should make for Mormont Keep. There is much to discuss, and you both deserve food and rest. His gaze swept over the carnage on the beach. And we have much to account for this unexpected assault. As we walked the path towards Mormont Keep, the grim evidence of the reaver attack lining our way, I voiced my concern. Lord Mormont, I said, the image of the burning villages still vivid in my mind, we should send word to King's Landing. King Aegon needs to know of this brazen attack. Lord Mormont shook his head, his expression weary. With all due respect, Lord Stark, I fear such a measure would be as effective as spitting into the sea during a storm. These were Ironborn, make no mistake. Their longships, their savagery, it bears their mark. But they flew no banners, swore no allegiance to the Iron Throne in this act of piracy. When the Raven arrives in King's Landing, the Ironborn lords will feign ignorance, claiming these were rogue reavers, acting on their own. The king will have no proof, no lord to hold accountable. It will be our word against theirs, and our word carries little weight against the Ironborn in the eyes of the Iron Throne when no banners are flown. His voice was heavy with years of dealing with the unpredictable brutality of the Ironborn. We must rely on our own strength here, Lord Stark. As we reached the sturdy walls of Mormont Keep, the grim atmosphere of the battlefield slowly giving way to the relative safety within, Lord Mormont extended guest rights. A palpable sense of relief settled over the weary islanders as they began to tend to their own. Rest now, Lord Stark, and you as well, Lord Janos, Lord Mormont said, his voice gruff but sincere. The maids will show you to your chambers and see to it that you have hot water for bathing. You have both earned it. Thank you, Lord Mormont, I replied, offering a weary nod. He returned it, then turned and strode away, Brian and Diana flanking him. My gaze, however, lingered. Diana Mormont, even amidst the grime of battle, possessed a raw, captivating presence. The way she carried herself, the unwavering intensity in her green eyes, I found myself watching her as she spoke briefly with her father, her movements decisive and strong. Janos' smirk widened, his eyes dancing with mischief. Seven hells, Theon, he chuckled, leaning closer. I've seen you stare at maps with less intensity. Did that mace-wielding she-bear steal your tongue along with those reavers' teeth? He nudged me again, a playful glint in his eyes. I always knew you had a soft spot for the spirited sort. But Lady Diana, she looks like she could wrestle a bear and win. Perhaps you finally found a woman who could keep you in line. Janos clapped me on the shoulder, his laughter rumbling in his chest. Don't worry, brother, I won't tell mother you've fallen for a she-bear. Though, a Mormont lass, they're known to be fiercely loyal. Might be a good match for a brooding wolf like you. He lowered his voice conspiratorially. Did you see the way she handled that mace? Maker's breath. She moves like a storm. Perhaps you should ask her to show you some techniques. For self-defense, of course. He punctuated his suggestion with a suggestive wiggle of his eyebrows. Come on, brother, Janos continued, his teasing relentless. Though, I wouldn't blame you if you dreamt of spiked maces and green eyes tonight. And like that, my first day on Bear Island, bought in blood and witnessed through a haze of unexpected fascination, was indelibly marked by the relentless, and ultimately endearing, teasing of Janos. 4 comments 0 vote. Bear Island. 37 AC. Diana Mormont. Theon Stark Pav. The next morning, the persistent but polite knocking on my chamber door roused me from a deep, dreamless sleep. A young maid, her cheeks rosy and her eyes downcast, informed me in a soft voice, Lord Stark, Lord Janos, Lord Mormont bids you to break your fast with him in the Great Hall. She curtsied quickly and retreated, leaving the invitation hanging in the air. The scent of wood smoke and something savory, likely fish or smoked meat, wafted faintly from the corridor, a welcome change from the lingering tang of salt and blood from the previous day. After a quick wash and a change into cleaner tunics, the salt and grime of battle still clinging faintly to our gear, Janos and I made our way to the Great Hall of Mormont Keep. As we entered, the warmth of the hearth and the aroma of a hearty meal enveloped us. Lord Mormont sat at the head of the long table, his wife, a stern-faced woman with kind eyes, beside him. Their son, Brian, sat to his father's right, and Lady Diana was seated across from him. They all looked up as we approached, a silent invitation in their gazes. Lord Stark, Lord Janos, Lord Mormont greeted, a hint of a smile touching his lips. Welcome. Please, join us. We were waiting for you to begin. We exchanged polite greetings with Lord and Lady Mormont, and a curt nod with Brian. When my eyes met Diana's, there was a brief, almost imperceptible flicker of recognition, a shared memory of the previous day's violence. I offered a respectful nod, which she returned with a steady gaze. So, Lord Stark, Lord Mormont began, his gaze direct, you mentioned your journey was to observe the progress in the north. What are your impressions of what you've seen? Impressive, Lord Mormont, I replied honestly. The roads are opening up trade and communication, the windmills are a testament to northern ingenuity, and the spirit of the small folk seems resilient. There is a sense of progress, of building a stronger future. Janos chimed in, a grin on his face. Aye, and the ale is getting better in every holdfast we visit. Though nothing quite beats Winterfell's brew, of course. Lady Mormont offered a small smile. A healthy ale is a sign of a healthy community, Lord Janos. Brian, who had been silently eating, finally spoke. And what of the rumors, Lord Stark? Whispers of new ways. My father has heard tales. His gaze was shrewd, probing. I chose my words carefully. Innovation is necessary for survival in the north, Lord Brian. We are exploring methods to improve our yields, our defenses, to ensure the long winters do not claim more than they must. I avoided any direct mention of magic. Diana, who had been listening intently, her green eyes sharp, finally spoke, her voice low and steady. And the Reavers, Lord Stark. Do you believe this was an isolated incident? Or a sign of something more? Her gaze held mine, direct and unwavering. That is what troubles me, Lady Diana, I admitted. The boldness of their attack, so far south, it suggests a desperation, or perhaps a new level of audacity. We must consider the possibility that this was not merely a random act of piracy. Janos frowned, his earlier joviality fading. They were well organized, that's for certain. Not just a handful of raggedy raiders. Lord Mormont nodded grimly. Bear Island has seen its share of Ironborn over the centuries, but this felt different. More focused. Did you recognize any of their markings? Any banners, even if quickly stowed? I asked, my gaze sweeping over the Mormonts. Brian shook his head. No banners. Their ships were fast, lean, typical longships, but unmarked. Diana added, her voice hard, they fought with a ferocity that spoke of experience, not just drunken bravado. Her grip tightened slightly on her knife. We will be more vigilant now. As the discussion was going on, a wry smile touched Diana Mormont's lips, a hint of amusement softening her usually intense gaze. Lord Stark, she began, her voice laced with a playful edge, I must confess, your arrival on the battlefield yesterday was, certainly memorable. A flush crept up my neck. I braced myself for what was coming. Her green eyes sparkled with mischief. While my father and brother were rallying the defenses, and Lord Janos was, enthusiastically introducing those reavers to northern steel, she paused, a slight tilt to her head, you seem to be, observing the finer points of reaver anatomy. From a rather, distant perspective. Brian Mormont chuckled, a low rumble in his chest. Even Lord and Lady Mormont exchanged knowing glances. Indeed, Diana continued, a teasing lilt in her voice. For a moment, I wondered if we had gained a particularly well-dressed, if somewhat immobile, statue on our shores. One with remarkably fine swords, I'll grant you. Lady Diana, I stammered, trying to find a witty retort but failing miserably under her direct, amused gaze. I was merely assessing the enemy's tactics. The excuse sounded weak even to my own ears. Janos, of course, seized the opportunity. He boomed, slapping me on the back. Theon has a very thorough method of assessment. Usually involves a lot of staring and not a lot of actual fighting. Unless the enemy happens to be particularly striking. He winked pointedly at Diana. Diana's smile widened. Striking, you say? Well, Lord Stark, I assure you, the Reavers were hardly a sight to behold. Unless one has a particular fondness for filth and bad teeth. She paused, her gaze returning to mine, a playful challenge in her eyes. Perhaps next time, you could favor us with a more active form of assessment. My cheeks burned hotter. I could feel Janos practically vibrating with suppressed laughter beside me. All I could manage was a weak smile and a mumbled, I shall endeavor to be more engaged. Diana's smile softened slightly, though the amusement still lingered in her eyes. I have no doubt you will, Lord Stark. Especially if there are more striking elements to observe. As the last remnants of our meal were cleared away, Lord Mormont rose, stretching his broad shoulders. A bit of rest might serve us well after yesterday's unpleasantness, he rumbled. Then, perhaps, a visit to the courtyard. A friendly bout or two might clear the cobwebs. Janos, a wide grin spreading across his face, clapped me on the shoulder. Theon's been itching to wrestle the she-bear, haven't you, brother? He punctuated his words with a suggestive wink towards Diana. A playful glint entered Diana's green eyes. Wrestle, Lord Stark? She echoed, a delicate smile playing on her lips. I wasn't aware you had such primal urges. She raised a brow, her gaze lingering on me for a moment longer than strictly necessary. Be warned, my lord, bears are known for their strong grip. The teasing continued as we made our way out of the great hall and towards the training yard. Janos regaled Lord and Lady Mormont and Brian with exaggerated tales of my supposed infatuation, while Diana chimed in with witty remarks about my captivated stance during the battle and the potential dangers of underestimating a she-bear in close quarters. My attempts at dignified retorts were mostly drowned out by Janos' booming laughter and Diana's subtle, yet pointed, barbs. By the time we reached the sun-drenched courtyard, the air was thick with the scent of salt and steel, and my cheeks were still burning with a mixture of embarrassment and a strange, undeniable thrill. Brian and Janos were already trading blows in the center of the courtyard, the clang of steel echoing in the crisp air. Janos, despite his size, moved with surprising agility, Winter's bite a blur of motion against Brian's more traditional longsword. Brian was a skilled swordsman in his own right, his movements solid and well practiced, but Janos' wilder style and the reach of his bastard sword kept him on the defensive. Diana watched the bout with a keen eye, her arms crossed. Your brother fights with a certain enthusiasm, she observed, a slight smile playing on her lips. Less disciplined than Brian, perhaps, but undeniably effective. Janos has always favored a more direct approach, I replied, my gaze flicking between the sparring brothers and the intense woman beside me. He relies on instinct and strength. Brian's form is more refined, more measured. He is a good man, my brother, Diana said, her voice softening slightly. Loyal and brave, as are the men you brought with you. The breathing technique you provide at last feast helped us a lot during the battle. A hearty round of applause broke out from the Mormont men-at-arms. Lord Mormont clapped Janos on the back. A good showing, Lord Janos. You fight with the ferocity of a true Northman. Janos, basking in the praise, turned to me with a mischievous glint in his eyes. Now then, brother, he drawled, his gaze flicking between me and Diana. Perhaps it's your turn for a bit of friendly sparring. I'm sure Lady Diana would be delighted to test her mettle against the famed skill of a Stark. He punctuated his suggestion with a pointed wink. Though perhaps a less wrestling-focused match this time. Diana's lips curved into a challenging smile. Indeed, Lord Stark, I would be most interested to see if your swordsmanship is as captivating as your battlefield observations. She moved with a fluid grace to where her spiked mace lay. She hefted it, the heavy head glinting in the sunlight. I hesitated for a moment, a strange mix of anticipation and reluctance swirling within me. But the challenge in her eyes, coupled with Janos' relentless teasing, was hard to resist. I nodded, stepping into the training yard. A nearby guardsman offered me a well-balanced longsword. The circle of onlookers widened as we faced each other. Diana held her mace with a confident ease, the spikes looking wickedly effective. I gripped the longsword, the familiar weight comforting in my hand. We circled each other slowly, the only sound the soft crunch of our boots on the packed earth. She moved first, her advance surprisingly swift for someone wielding such a heavy weapon. Her swings were powerful and direct, each spiked head a potential bone breaker. I parried her attacks with the longsword, the clang of metal echoing in the yard. Her ferocity was undeniable, a whirlwind of raw strength and determination. While I possessed the honed skill and the almost preternatural awareness gifted by my training, a talent akin to the swordsman Mahawk of whom I had read, I held back. I allowed her to press her attack, testing her skill, observing her movements, her relentless spirit. We traded blows, the dance of steel and spiked metal a stark contrast in styles. She fought with the untamed fury of a she-bear defending her den, while I moved with a more controlled, almost languid grace. The bout continued for a while, Diana's breath coming in short, sharp gasps as she put her all into each swing. But eventually, her relentless assault began to flag, her movements losing a fraction of their initial speed. Seizing the opportunity, I executed a swift parry, deflecting her mace wide, and with a fluid motion, disarmed her with a gentle tap to her wrist. The heavy mace clattered to the ground. Diana stood panting, her green eyes blazing with a mixture of exertion and grudging respect. "You are skilled, Lord Stark," she conceded, a hint of a smile touching her lips. "Far more engaged than you were yesterday." The rest of the day unfolded with Lord Mormont and his family showing us the rugged beauty of Bear Island. We rode along windswept cliffs, the air thick with the cries of seabirds and the salty tang of the sea. Lord Mormont spoke with pride of his island's resilience, its people as hardy and unyielding as the granite shores. He showed us the dense forests that provided timber for their ships and the fishing villages that dotted the coastline, their inhabitants now slowly recovering from the Reaver attack. Brian pointed out the strategic locations of their defenses, the watchtowers perched on high bluffs, ever vigilant against threats from the sea. Diana, surprisingly, was a knowledgeable guide, pointing out unique flora and fauna, her earlier fierce intensity softened by a quiet connection to her home. She spoke of the long winters and the resourcefulness required to survive them, painting a vivid picture of Bear Island's unique character. As the day drew to a close, and the setting sun cast long shadows across the windswept landscape, I found myself looking at Diana with a newfound appreciation. Beneath the fierce warrior exterior lay a deep connection to her land and her people. The teasing from earlier in the day seemed a distant memory, replaced by a shared experience of witnessing the strength and resilience of Bear Island. Even Janos, usually full of boisterous commentary, seemed subdued by the island's stark beauty and the quiet determination of its inhabitants. The day offered a glimpse into the heart of House Mormont, a house as formidable and enduring as the island they called home. 3 comments 0 vote. Journey ends. 38 AC. Third person POV. A day had passed since the return of Theon and Janos to Winterfell, the familiar grey walls a welcome sight after their long journey across the north. The courtyard had been filled with the bustling activity of servants and guards, but all had paused as the Stark brothers rode through the gates. Their mother, Lady Gillian, had rushed forward, tears of relief and joy streaming down her face as she embraced them both in turn, her grip tight and unwavering. Lord Brandon Stark stood slightly behind her, a rare but genuine smile gracing his stern features, his eyes reflecting a father's pride in his son's safe return and the work they had accomplished. The air in Torrhen Stark's solar was thick with the scent of old parchment and wood smoke. The setting sun cast long shadows across the room, illuminating the stern faces gathered around the ancient table. Lord Brandon Stark sat upright, his gaze fixed intently on Janos, who was recounting their journey across the north with his usual dramatic flair. Grandfather Torrhen, his eyes sharp despite his advanced years, leaned forward, his weathered hands resting on the table. Theon sat quietly, observing his family, the weight of their shared secrets a tangible presence in the room. Janos was in the midst of describing the Reaver attack on Bear Island, his voice animated as he recounted the chaos on the shore, the clash of steel, and the fierce resistance of the Mormonts. He painted a vivid picture of Diana Mormont, wielding her spiked mace with the fury of a cornered bear, his earlier teasing now replaced with genuine admiration for her courage. And then, grandfather, father, Janos gestured emphatically, they came in these longships, sleek and fast, no banners flying, just pure savage intent. They fell upon the fishing villages like wolves on sheep. But the Mormonts, gods bless them, they fought back hard. And then Theon and our guards arrived, and we pushed the bastards back into the sea. Lord Brandon's brow was furrowed. No banners, you say? Ironborn ships, undoubtedly. Ironborn through and through, father, Janos confirmed, nodding grimly. You could smell the salt and the arrogance off them. But no lord's colors, nothing to tie them to any specific house. Grandfather Torrhen grunted, his gaze distant. Pirates, then. Reavers acting on their own. But there was a skepticism in his voice, a sense that there was more to this than a simple raid. Theon finally spoke, his voice calm but carrying a note of concern. The scale of the attack was troubling, grandfather. It wasn't just a handful of longships. There were many, well organized and fiercely armed. It felt bolder than the usual reaving. He exchanged a look with Janos, a silent acknowledgement of their shared unease. Janos nodded in agreement. It was more than just a snatch and grab. They seemed intent on causing real damage. Lord Brandon steepled his fingers, his expression thoughtful. Bear Island is a hard nut to crack. For them to attempt such a raid, something has changed. He looked at Theon. Did Lord Mormont have any inkling of why they might have been targeted? Theon shook his head. He was as surprised as we were, father. They had no warnings, no prior attacks of this scale. Grandfather Torrhen's gaze sharpened. The North is stirring. Our projects, our advancements, they have not gone unnoticed. Could this be a warning? A test? The weight of their secrets, the subtle shifts in the North's power, hung heavy in the solar. The Reaver attack on Bear Island felt like more than just random piracy. It felt like a shadow stretching from the horizon, a first taste of the challenges that might lie ahead. A heavy silence fell over the solar after Torrhen Stark's words, the weight of the news settling upon them. The setting sun dipped further below the horizon, casting the room in deeper shadows. Finally, Grandfather Torrhen spoke, his voice grave. There is more. A missive arrived from Castle Black just a few days past. The Night's Watch, they have seen signs. A king beyond the wall. One who is gathering the scattered tribes, banding the wildlings together in numbers not seen in centuries. A collective unease rippled through the room. Lord Brandon's brow furrowed deeper. A king beyond the wall. Who? Torrhen Stark sighed, a weary sound that spoke of long years and countless threats to the north. They call him Ragnar Lothbrok. A charismatic leader, it seems. He has united many of the disparate tribes, the Thens, the Hornfoots, the Ice River clans. The Watch fears he intends to march on the wall. Janos shifted uneasily in his seat. Ragnar Lothbrok. All of them. United. That's unprecedented. Theon felt a cold dread grip his heart. A united wildling host led by such a figure was a threat to North. The wall, though formidable, was manned by a dwindling force. The numbers? Lord Brandon asked, his voice tight with concern. What are the Watch estimates? According to the estimates, Torrhen replied, his gaze troubled. Around 100,000, perhaps even more. Enough to trouble if determined. Theon fell silent, his gaze fixed on the flickering flames in the hearth, his mind racing. The news of Ragnar Lothbrok and his unified wildling host hung heavy in the air. After a long moment, he finally spoke, his voice measured but firm. Perhaps there is another way. Janos snorted, his skepticism evident. Another way? They're wildlings, Theon. Savages who raid and kill. What other way could there possibly be? Peace, Theon stated simply, meeting his brother's incredulous gaze. We should seek peace with them. Ask them to bend the knee, to pledge fealty to Winterfell, and join the North. Janos' jaw dropped, his eyes wide with disbelief. Peace? Are you touched in the head, Theon? That's about as likely as finding an ice dragon in the Wolfswood. Even if this, Ragnar Lothbrok, were mad enough to agree, which I highly doubt, the northern lords would sooner sup on their own boots than share land with those savages. Generations of raiding, of kin stolen and villages burned, the hatred runs deeper than the roots of the oldest heart tree. Lord Brandon, who had been listening intently, nodded in grim agreement. Your brother speaks the truth, Theon. The hatred runs deep. It would be near impossible to bridge that chasm. Aye, but the true enemy is not the living, Theon insisted, his voice rising with conviction. It is the dead, shadows in the snow, creatures that should not exist. If the dead rise in force, what chance do we stand against them divided? We need every living soul we can muster. He looked at his brother, his eyes pleading for understanding. Think of it, Janos. An army of hardened warriors, familiar with the harsh lands beyond the wall, fighting alongside us against a common foe. Grandfather Torrhen, who had remained silent, his gaze thoughtful, finally spoke. Even if we were to entertain this audacious proposition, Theon, who would go beyond the wall and speak to this king? It is a fool's errand, fraught with peril. I will go, Theon declared, his voice resolute. I will take a small company of the Wolfpack, those who understand the breathing techniques, those I trust implicitly. I will speak to Ragnar Lothbrok myself. You, beyond the wall, Janos protested vehemently, leaping to his feet. That's madness. I'm going with you. No, Janos, Theon said firmly, meeting his brother's gaze. I am the heir to Winterfell. My word carries weight. If I can convince Ragnar Lothbrok of the truth of our threat, it will hold more value than if anyone else went. And if something were to happen to me, he hesitated, then continued, then you would be the heir. You would need to be here, ready to take on that responsibility. Janos still argued, his face etched with worry, but Theon remained steadfast. Finally, with a heavy sigh, Janos relented. Lord Brandon watched his son, a deep sadness in his eyes, and gave a slow, dejected nod. Grandfather Torrhen, after a long, silent contemplation, finally spoke. 5 moons, he said, his voice raspy but firm. 5 moons from now, you will go beyond the wall, Theon Stark. May the old gods guide your steps. The heavy silence that followed Theon's audacious proposal was broken by Grandfather Torrhen, his voice now carrying a different weight, a somber note that eclipsed even the news of the Wildling King. There is other news that has reached Winterfell, lads, he said, his gaze drifting towards the dying embers in the hearth. A raven arrived from King's Landing, carried by swift wings. King Aegon, his health is failing rapidly. The maesters say he is on his deathbed. It is no longer a matter of if, but when the conqueror will breathe his last. A stunned silence descended upon the solar. Aegon Targaryen, the dragon, the man who had forged the 7 kingdoms, his mortality had always seemed a distant, almost abstract concept. Lord Brandon's brow furrowed with a new concern. The succession, what news of that? The missive was brief on details, Torrhen replied, his expression grim. Prince Aenys is his named heir, but there are whispers, always whispers in the Red Keep. Of factions, of those who might challenge his claim. Janos shifted uneasily. A king dying, and talk of unrest in the south. It feels like the world is shifting beneath our feet. Theon felt the weight of this new information settle upon him. A destabilized south, a potential war of succession, coupled with the threat beyond the wall, the north was facing dangers on multiple fronts. His journey beyond the wall now felt even more precarious, a gamble taken amidst a world teetering on the brink of chaos. Torrhen Stark waved a dismissive hand, his gaze hardening. The squabbles of the south are of little concern to us. Let the vipers in King's Landing coil and strike at one another. They are driven by ambition and the lust for power, always searching for reasons to spill blood for their own gain. Their games will not shield them from the true winter that is coming. Our focus must remain here, in the north, on the threats that truly matter, the wildlings beyond the wall and whatever darkness stirs in the frozen wastes. Let the dragons fight amongst themselves, the wolves have their own battles to prepare for. His words were firm, a stark reminder of the North's traditional isolation and its focus on the more primal dangers that lurked in its own harsh lands. So be it, Grandfather Torrhen declared, his gaze fixed on Theon. Prepare yourself to go beyond the wall when the time comes. Choose your companions wisely. If your negotiations with this Wildling King bear fruit, send a raven with haste. I will summon every lord of the north to Castle Black. We will meet with Ragnar Lothbrok and his leaders, face to face, and forge whatever alliance is possible. It will be a delicate dance, fraught with mistrust, but if it offers the north a chance against the true enemy, we must attempt it. A heavy silence hung in the air, the weight of the decision palpable. Theon nodded, the enormity of the task ahead settling upon him. An hour passed in tense discussion, dissecting the potential pitfalls and the slim possibilities of such an unprecedented alliance. They spoke of the ingrained hatred between Northmen and Wildlings, the logistical challenges of such a gathering, and the delicate balance of power beyond the wall. Finally, as the last embers in the hearth glowed softly, the meeting broke. Theon and Janos left the solar, the weight of their respective duties pressing down on them, the fate of the north hanging precariously in the balance. 3 comments 0 vote. Negotiations with the king beyond the wall. 38 AC. Theon Stark Pav. 6 moons. 6 moons since that tense conversation in Grandfather's solar, a conversation that had left a chasm between mother and me. Her silence had been a heavier burden than any scolding, a week of unspoken worry etched on her face. It had taken all my persuasive skills, all my reassurances of the necessity of this journey, to finally earn her tearful, reluctant blessing. And now, here I stood, north of the wall, the biting wind whipping at my furs, the vast, unforgiving landscape stretching out before me. The fist of the first men, a jagged crown of rock against the pale sky, was our agreed meeting place with Ragnar Lothbrok. My small company of the Wolfpack, their faces grim and watchful, huddled nearby, their silent breathing a familiar comfort. I waited, the anticipation a knot in my stomach. What words could bridge the centuries of hatred? What arguments could convince a king of Wildlings to kneel before the Starks? The task felt monumental, the odds stacked against me. But my purpose extended beyond this fragile negotiation. Once a truce, however tenuous, was established, I knew what I had to do next. The true threat lay not in the living wildlings, but in the ancient darkness stirring in the far north. I had to seek out the children of the forest, the last remnants of the old magic, and the giants, their strength of force of nature. I had to convince them to abandon their ancient territories and seek refuge south of the wall. Only by uniting all the living, both south and north of the wall, could we hope to stand against the coming storm of the dead. The weight of the north, perhaps even the world, rested on these perilous negotiations and the even more daunting quest that would follow. According to my previous lives' memories, the children of the forest in the hidden cave under the oldest heart tree, places where the magic is strong, untouched by the relentless march of humankind. The wildlings, who braved these frozen wastes, might know the location of the tree. And the giants' village surely, the free folk, who lived and died in these harsh lands, would know their paths and their lairs. My musings were broken by a soft stirring against my cheek. Frost, the dire wolf pup cradled in my hands, was waking. His fur, white as the freshly fallen snow, brushed against my glove, and his eyes, the blue of a summer sky, blinked open. A small whimper escaped his throat, followed by a wet nudge against my face. 6 there were, their mother was slain by shadowcats, leaving these tiny lives in our charge. Maybe I can warg into them in the future. Frost, the first of the litter. The others awaited the names. My lord, Torrhen's voice, rough as northern stone, cut through the wind's lament. He gestured with a gloved hand towards the horizon. They approach. I lifted my gaze, Frost shifting restlessly in my arms, his blue eyes now fixed on the figures emerging from the swirling snow and mist. Ragnar Lothbrok and his wildlings drew nearer. The time for thought had passed. The negotiations, and perhaps the forging of a new destiny for the north, was about to begin in this desolate, frozen waste. They got closer, a rough-looking group dressed in furs and carrying weapons. The man leading them was tall with a weathered face and sharp, gray eyes. He stopped a short distance away, and his followers also became quiet. He looked at me, his gaze pausing on Frost, the white direwolf pup I was holding. A slow smile appeared on his face, a smile that seemed both amused and a little respectful. Greetings, Magnar Wolf, Ragnar Lothbrok said, his voice having a unique sound, a mix of the harsh northern accent and something else. I've come as you asked. Let's talk. I returned his greeting, my voice steady despite the weight of the situation. Ragnar Lothbrok, I said, my gaze sweeping over the assembled wildlings. You have gathered a vast host. Whispers speak of 100,000, perhaps more. Even with such numbers, you cannot hope to breach the wall. Why this massive gathering? Ragnar's gray eyes held a weariness that belied his imposing presence. For the future of my people, Magnar Wolf, he replied, his voice carrying a hint of the harsh winds they had both endured. The winters grow longer, the game grows scarce. Soon, our children will starve. Our old men, who should be resting by the fire, are forced to hunt in the frozen forests, many never to return. I gather them so they may live, so they may have a chance at a future beyond the frost and hunger that gnaws at our heels. And so began a long parley on the windswept plains beyond the wall. I spoke of the true enemy, the dead that stirred in the darkness, the ancient threat that knew no walls. Ragnar spoke of the desperation of his people, the endless struggle for survival in a land that offered little but hardship. We talked of the wall, its ancient magic and its formidable defenses, and the futility of a direct assault. I offered a different path, a chance for his people to find refuge and sustenance within the north, if they would bend the knee and join us against the coming darkness. Ragnar listened, his sharp eyes assessing my sincerity, weighing the desperate plight of his people against the ingrained mistrust between our two worlds. The fate of thousands hung on the words exchanged in that icy wasteland. A future in the north. Ragnar echoed, his brow furrowing. A murmur rippled through his assembled warriors. Your lords would sooner see us butchered than share their lands with us. We remember the raids, the broken treaties, the heads on spikes. Those were different times, I countered, my voice firm. Different threats. The dead do not care about old grudges or spilled blood between living men. They will come for us all, Northmen and Wildling alike. We can stand divided and fall, or unite and have a chance to survive. Bend the knee, Ragnar Lothbrok, and pledge your people to Winterfell. In return, we will grant you land, sustenance, and protection within our borders. Fight alongside us against the true enemy, and your people will have a future in a world that would otherwise consume us all. Ragnar's gray eyes narrowed, studying me intently. And what of your night's watch, Magnar Wolf? It has stood for thousands of years to keep us out. What does it do in the future? The watch stands against the dead, I replied, my gaze unwavering. They are to guard against the dead, not the living. They will do their duty. And when the true war begins, the wall will be our shield, protecting all the living. A long silence stretched between us, broken only by the howling wind. Ragnar turned, speaking in the guttural tongue of the Wildlings to his closest advisors. Their faces were etched with suspicion and a lifetime of ingrained hatred for the people south of the wall. Finally, Ragnar turned back to me. My people are proud, Magnar Wolf. They have known freedom beyond your walls for generations. To bend the knee, it is a hard thing to ask. Survival is a harder thing to earn when the dead walk, I countered, my voice low but urgent. Pride will not keep you warm when the long night comes. Freedom will be a meaningless word when there is no life left to live it. I offer you a chance, Ragnar. A chance for your children to see the spring, for your old men to die in their beds. An alliance against the darkness. What say you? Ragnar Lothbrok stood silent for a long moment, his gaze sweeping over his people, then back to me, the white direwolf pup still nestled in my arms. The weight of his decision, the future of his people, hung heavy in the frozen air. There is another way to settle this, Ragnar Lothbrok, I proposed, my voice cutting through the tense silence. An old way, perhaps one your people still understand. You and I, one-on-one, we fight, until one yields. The victor decides the terms of our agreement. A flicker of interest sparked in Ragnar's gray eyes. A murmur rippled through the Wildling ranks. This was a language they understood, a test of strength and will. The old way, Ragnar echoed, a grim smile touching his lips. I have not tasted a true fight in too long. And you, Magnar Wolf? Do you have the steel in your veins to face a Wildling King? The survival of my people, and perhaps yours, depends on it, I replied, my hand instinctively resting on the hilt of my sword. I am ready. Ragnar nodded, a decisive glint in his eyes. So be it, let the old gods witness our accord. Choose your weapon, Magnar Wolf. I drew my longsword, the steel gleaming dully in the pale light. Ragnar hefted a massive axe, its blade scarred and wickedly sharp. The Wildlings and my wolf pack formed a wide circle, the tension palpable in the frozen air. This was more than just a negotiation, it was a test of strength, a dance on the edge of peace or war. We circled each other slowly, the silence broken only by the whistling wind and our measured breaths. Ragnar moved with a surprising agility for a man of his size, his axe held ready. I kept my stance fluid, my longsword a shield and a potential strike. He lunged first, his axe whistling through the air in a wide, powerful arc. I parried, the impact jarring my arm. The fight had begun. The clash of steel against iron echoed across the desolate plain, a stark counterpoint to the mournful howl of the wind. Ragnar Lothbrok, despite the heft of his scarred axe, moved with a surprising ferocity, each swing a brutal testament to his strength and years of survival beyond the wall. His gray eyes, sharp and calculating, never left mine, seeking any flicker of weakness. I met his initial assault with the fluid grace my training had instilled, Jon and Theo singing a deadly duet as they intercepted the heavy blows of his axe. The impact reverberated through my arms, a raw power that spoke of Ragnar's untamed strength. I danced around his wider swings, the twin blades a blur of motion, deflecting the brutal force and seeking openings in his defense. Ragnar roared, a primal sound that echoed across the frozen landscape, and pressed his attack. He feinted high with the axe, then brought it low in a sweeping arc aimed at my legs. I leapt back, the cold air whistling where the blade had been, and retaliated with a swift thrust of Theo towards his exposed side. Ragnar grunted, twisting his torso just enough to deflect the blow with the haft of his axe. The fight became a whirlwind of movement. Ragnar's axe, though powerful, was slower than my twin blades. I used this to my advantage, darting in and out of his reach, scoring glancing blows against his thick furs and leather armor. Jon sliced across his forearm, drawing a bead of crimson, while Theo forced him to parry with a desperate upward swing. He was a seasoned warrior, though, his movements honed by countless skirmishes in the wild. He used the weight of his axe to his advantage, creating openings with powerful blocks and sudden, unpredictable shifts in attack. He aimed for my head, my chest, my legs, each blow carrying the potential to end the fight instantly. I relied on the speed and versatility of Jon and Theo, weaving a defensive web of steel while constantly probing for weaknesses. My movements were more controlled, more precise than Ragnar's raw aggression. I parried a vicious overhead chop, the force threatening to buckle my stance, and then countered with a lightning-fast series of slashes. On danced across his shoulder, drawing more blood, while Theo forced him to retreat a step. The fight wore on, the rhythm of steel on steel a steady beat against the backdrop of the frozen wilderness. Ragnar's breath came in ragged gasps, and I could see a flicker of frustration in his eyes. He was strong, undeniably so, but the speed and the dual threat of my blades were beginning to wear him down. He made a desperate move, a wild, lunging attack with his axe aimed at my chest. I sidestepped, using his momentum against him, and brought both Jon and Theo down in a swift, cross-body strike. One blade scraped against his ribs, tearing through his furs, while the other bit deep into his thigh. Ragnar roared in pain, his axe clattering to the icy ground. He stumbled, his hand clutching his bleeding leg. He looked at me, his gray eyes filled with a grudging respect, and a flicker of understanding. He straightened, his jaw tight. Yield, he growled, his voice rough with pain and exertion. I yield, Magnar Wolf. A collective murmur rippled through the assembled wildlings. The fight was over. Ragnar Lothbrok, the king beyond the wall, had yielded to me. The terms of their future now lay in my hands. Turning from the fallen Ragnar, my breath misting in the cold air, I addressed him, my voice carrying across the silent plain. Ragnar Lothbrok, you have yielded. Now comes the part of our agreement. I ask not for your life, but for the future of your people. Will you bend the knee to Winterfell? Will you pledge your allegiance to the north? Ragnar, still clutching his injured thigh, met my gaze, his expression a mixture of pain and grudging respect. After a long moment, he nodded slowly. I, Magnar Wolf, for the sake of my people, I will bend the knee. A collective sigh seemed to pass through the gathered wildlings. The impossible had happened. There will be terms, I continued, my gaze sweeping over the assembled host. Many details to be decided. But two are paramount. First, I stated, my voice firm, your people will not force their ways upon the small folk of the north. There will be no raiding, no pillaging, no taking what is not freely given. The north has suffered enough. You seek shelter with us, you will respect our laws and our people. A low murmur rippled through the gathered wildlings, but Ragnar raised a hand, silencing them. He met my gaze, his own hardening. And the second, I continued, my voice gaining a sharper edge, there will be no cannibalism within the north. That practice is an abomination, a defilement of the living and the dead. I understand that some beyond the wall have resorted to such horrors in the deepest of winters, but it will not be tolerated in my lands. If any among your people still cling to such a custom, they will face the justice of Winterfell. This is not a request, Ragnar. It is a demand. Ragnar's gaze was steady, a hint of distaste flickering across his weathered features. You speak of a things I do not welcome in my ranks, Magnar Wolf. The weak and the desperate may have succumbed to such acts in the frozen wastes, but those who follow me do not. It is a path of madness and despair. You have my word on this. There will be no such defilement among my people. A collective murmur of agreement rippled through the wildlings. My word is my bond, Ragnar Lothbrok, I replied, sheathing Jon and Theo. The north will offer you refuge, and I believe your words regarding this matter. Send word to your people. Tell them the terms. Torrhen, I called out, my voice clear across the clearing. Two of my most trusted Wolfpack guards, their faces grim and loyal, stepped forward. Ride for Castle Black. Bear this message to my grandfather, Lord Torrhen Stark. Tell him the negotiations have been successful. Ragnar Lothbrok and his people will bend the knee and seek refuge in the north. Inform him of the terms we have agreed upon. No raiding of the small folk and no cannibalism. Torrhen and the other guard, Kale, exchanged a swift glance, a flicker of surprise and relief in their eyes. At once, Lord Stark, Torrhen replied, a rare hint of a smile touching his lips. Tell him to begin preparations, I continued, my gaze sweeping back to Ragnar and his people. Tell him to summon the lords of the north to Castle Black. The meeting will take place in Moon. The future of the north, and perhaps more, depends on what happens next. The two guards nodded resolutely, already turning towards their horses. The message of a potential alliance, a chance for survival against the coming darkness, needed to reach Winterfell and the rest of the north with all possible speed. The first hurdle had been crossed. Now came the far more delicate and challenging task of uniting two peoples with centuries of hatred between them against a common, far greater foe. 3 comments 0 vote. Giants. 38 AC. Beyond the wall. Theon Stark Pav. Ragnar, I said, turning back to the Wildling King and looking at the large group of people behind him. You mentioned a big group. Can you tell me the real numbers? How many people have you brought south of the wall? Ragnar looked back at me, his face serious. We are a lot, Magnar Wolf. Generations have lived and died beyond your ice wall. Hunger and cold have killed many, but still, we are a people. In my camp, there are about 100,000 people. That includes the fighters you saw, yes, but also our women, our children, and our old people. We've brought everything we have left. 100,000. That's a huge number. It's more people than I've ever seen together. Finding homes and food for that many people in the north, especially with winter coming, is going to be a massive job. The lords will argue, and the common people will be scared. But these are lives that would be lost to the dead, and they could fight with us in the big war. This alliance, started because we're desperate and have a shaky agreement, will test how much the North has and how kind we can be. Giants, Ragnar, I asked, shifting my focus to the other ancient race. Your people must have encountered them in these vast lands. Where do they dwell? Their villages, their gathering places. Ragnar's expression shifted, a hint of awe mixed with curiosity entering his eyes. The giants, they are different from what the tales often tell, Magnar Wolf. They do not live as we do, hunting flesh. They have learned to live from the land, harvesting what they can with the aid of the great mammoths. They move in large family groups, and sometimes they gather in sheltered valleys, places where the earth yields roots and hardy plants, and the mammoths help them till the frozen ground. Villages, then, I pressed. Specific locations where they gather regularly. Ragnar nodded slowly. There are certain valleys, hidden deep within the Frostfangs, where they return each season. Places where the mammoths know the best grazing and the earth offers sustenance. My scouts have seen their trails leading to these valleys. They are not villages as you understand them, but they are places where the giants gather in numbers. Can you lead me to these valleys? I asked, my voice urgent. Or guide my wolf pack. We need to speak with them. Their strength, and their connection to this land, could be invaluable in the battles to come. Ragnar stroked his beard, his gaze thoughtful. The giants are a proud and wary folk. They do not easily trust the little people. But if they sense the coming darkness, as you say, perhaps they would listen to a warning. I have trackers who know the paths through the mountains, who have seen the giants' gatherings. I will lead you to them. I know the way to these valleys. Then show me these valleys, I urged, my gaze intent. Lead my wolf pack to these gathering places of the giants. I will speak to them. I will try to make them understand the danger that approaches from the north, the threat that knows no size or strength. I paused, my hand instinctively resting on the hilt of John. And if words fail, then perhaps there is still the old way. A challenge. A demonstration of strength that even they can understand. But I pray it does not come to that. We need allies, not enemies, in the long night that is coming. The following dawn broke cold and gray over the desolate landscape. True to his word, Ragnar Lothbrok and his group of skilled trackers guide me and a contingent of my wolf pack towards the rumored gathering places of the giants. The wildlings, hardened by years of survival in this unforgiving land, moved with a silent efficiency, their knowledge of the terrain proving invaluable as we navigated treacherous passes and icy plains. Frost, nestled securely in a specially crafted pouch on my saddle, remained a silent companion, his white fur a stark contrast to the rugged landscape. The journey was arduous, the biting wind and the uneven terrain testing the endurance of both men and horses. We saw signs of the giants, colossal tracks in the snow, trees uprooted with unnatural force, and the faint scent of mammoth lingering in the air, each sighting fueling a mixture of awe and apprehension among my men. 3 days later, after enduring bone-chilling nights huddled around meager fires and days spent traversing seemingly endless white expanses, the trackers signaled that we were approaching our destination. A vast valley opened before us, sheltered by towering peaks. In the distance, colossal shapes moved against the snow-covered ground. The giants. And with them, the massive, shaggy forms of mammoths, their tusks like ivory spears against the white. This was their gathering place. Now came the true test. Could I convince these ancient beings to heed the warnings of a man? As we cautiously approached the valley, the sheer scale of the giants became apparent. They were immense, their forms towering over the mammoths that moved beside them. Their voices, when they rumbled, sounded like the grinding of glaciers. One giant, larger than the rest, with a thick, matted beard and eyes like ancient stones, stepped forward, regarding us with a wary curiosity. This had to be their Magnar. Taking a deep breath, I dismounted, Frost whimpering softly in my pouch. I stepped forward, my voice echoing in the vast valley. Magnar of the giants, I called out, my tone respectful but firm. I have come with a warning. A long night is coming, a darkness filled with death. It will not spare the free folk, nor the giants. We must stand together against it. The giant Magnar tilted his massive head, studying me with an unnerving intensity. His voice, when it finally came, was a deep rumble that shook the very ground beneath my feet. Why should we heed the words of a little ling? You are small, weak. What threat can you truly face? Before I could answer, Ragnar Lothbrok stepped forward, his axe still strapped to his back, but his hand resting on its haft. He speaks truth, giant Magnar. And though he is small, he has a spirit stronger than many giants I have known. But perhaps you understand a different kind of strength. Ragnar's gray eyes met the giant's stony gaze. If he were to defeat you in single combat, Magnar of the giants, would you then lend your strength to our cause? Would you bend the knee to one who has proven his worth? The giant Magnar, Magmar Tun Do Weg, considered Ragnar's challenge, his massive gaze shifting from the Wildling King to me, then back again. A low rumble emanated from his chest, a sound that could have been amusement or perhaps the stirring of ancient battle lust. Finally, he dipped his massive head, a gesture that sent a cascade of snow from his matted beard. His voice, when it came, was like the cracking of ice on a frozen lake. A little ling, challenge Mag Mar Tundo Weg. It has been many ages since a small one dared such a thing. A hint of a guttural chuckle rumbled through him. But the long night you speak of, if it is as you say, then perhaps even the ways of the giants must change. Very well, I will battle this, Magnar Wolf. His gaze settled on me, a primal intensity in their ancient depths. If you defeat me, little one, then the giants will lend their strength to your cause. We will stand with you against this darkness. A collective murmur rippled through the gathered giants, a mix of curiosity and anticipation. Ragnar nodded, a grim satisfaction on his weathered face. My wolf pack shifted nervously, their hands instinctively moving towards their weapons. The space between Magmar Tundoeg and me widened. The giant Magnar reached for a massive club, a tree trunk stripped bare and reinforced with jagged stones. It looked like it could crush a man with a single blow. I drew Jon and Theo, the familiar weight of the twin blades a small comfort against the sheer size and power of my opponent. The air crackled with tension. The fate of an alliance, one forged between men and giants, was about to be decided in this ancient valley. The air in the valley thrummed with anticipation. Magmar Tundoeg was a titan, a being of raw, primal power. Standing before him, I felt impossibly small, a mere insect facing a walking mountain. His club, a length of ancient tree, looked capable of sweeping away entire ranks of men. Yet, Jon and Theo felt balanced in my grip, extensions of my will. Magmar Tundoeg moved with surprising speed for his size, his massive club whistling through the air like a battering ram. The wind generated by its passage buffeted me. I dodged, rolling low to the snow-covered ground, the impact shaking the earth. The club crashed down where I had been, leaving a crater in the frozen ground. He swung again, a horizontal strike that could have cleaved me in two. I sprang to my feet, Jon and Theo flashing upwards, deflecting the blow. The force of the impact jarred my arms, sending tremors through my body. I used his momentum against him, darting in close, my twin blades a whirlwind of steel aimed at his legs, the only vulnerable targets I could readily reach. Jon and Theo bit into his thick, leathery hide, drawing lines of dark blood. Magmar Tundoeg roared in pain and surprise, taking a lumbering step back. I pressed my advantage, sprinting forward and leaping onto his injured knee, using it as a springboard. With a final burst of strength, I launched myself upwards, landing with both feet on his face, the force of my weight driving him backwards. The giant Magnar crashed to the ground, the earth shaking with his fall. I landed lightly beside him, Jon and Theo held ready. He lay on his back, his massive chest heaving, his stone-like eyes filled with a mixture of pain and a dawning respect. I pressed the point of on against his thick neck, the cold steel a stark reminder of my victory. Yield, I said, my voice clear and firm. A low rumble escaped his chest, a sound of grudging acceptance. I yield, he grunted, the word heavy and ancient. Magmar Tundoeg, Magnar of the giants, had yielded. I had won the fight. The alliance, however improbable, was now forged. Looking around the vast valley, the true scale of the giants' gathering became apparent. Hundreds of them, their immense forms moving with a surprising gentleness amongst the mammoths, went about their daily routines. Children, smaller than adult men but still towering, played near their parents. Others worked at what appeared to be harvesting grounds, their massive hands surprisingly adept at gathering roots and hardy vegetation, aided by the powerful tusks of the mammoths. A rough count suggested close to 500 giants resided in this sheltered valley. An idea sparked in my mind. Moat Cailin. Its strategic importance as the gateway to the north was undeniable, but its defenses had fallen into disrepair over the centuries. The moat itself was largely silted up, and the towers needed significant restoration. The sheer strength of these giants, coupled with the earth-moving capabilities of the mammoths, could be invaluable. Relocating them to Moat Cailin would not only offer them a defensible territory within the north but also provide the manpower, or rather, giant power, needed for a massive construction project. They could help excavate the canal, rebuild the ancient fortifications, and make Moat Cailin the impenetrable barrier it once was. It was a bold plan, fraught with potential challenges in terms of logistics and acceptance by the northern lords, but the potential benefits were immense. A strong Moat Cailin, defended by giants, would be a formidable deterrent against any southern aggression and a vital stronghold against the coming darkness. 3 comments 0 vote. Children of the Forest. 38 AC. Beyond the Wall. Third-person POV. The next morning, under a sky the color of frozen steel, preparations for departure began. Theon Stark addressed Mag Mar Tun Do Weg and the assembled giants, his voice carrying across the valley. "We will return in 7 days," he announced. "Prepare your people for a journey south. We will find you a new home within the north, a place of safety." Mag Mar Tun Do Weg rumbled a response, a deep sound of understanding. The giants began to stir, a sense of anticipation in their massive movements. Turning to Ragnar Lothbrok, who stood nearby with a contingent of his wildlings, Theon inquired, "Ragnar, you and your people have lived in these lands for generations. You know the old ways, the hidden paths. Do you know where the oldest heart tree is?" Ragnar frowned, his weathered face creased in thought. "I don't know about the oldest, but I know there's a heart tree bigger than any I've seen beyond the haunted forest, Magnar Wolf." "Why do you need to go there?" Theon said, "I think we need to meet our ancestors' allies." Ragnar gave a puzzled look. "Ancestors' allies? You mean the children of the forest? They don't exist anymore. We haven't seen them in centuries." Theon said, "Lead me to these sacred groves, Ragnar," he urged. "If the children of the forest still exist, perhaps they dwell in such places. It's a chance we must take." "Aye," Ragnar replied, nodding slowly. "I know of paths that lead to such groves, places deep within the haunted forest. They aren't easy to find, and we risk angering whatever spirits linger there, but if that's your wish, Magnar Wolf, I'll guide you." And so, with the giants getting ready for their move and the faint hope of finding an ancient ally guiding their steps, Theon Stark, Ragnar Lothbrok, and their combined groups turned their backs on the Giants' Valley and began their trek towards the mysterious sacred groves deep within the haunted forest. Days of trekking through the haunted forest's oppressive gloom finally led them to a clearing bathed in an ethereal light. There stood a heart tree of immense size, its ancient carvings a swirling tapestry on its massive trunk, its branches reaching like gnarled limbs to the sky. Crimson sap wept from the carved face, staining the white wood like old blood. This was the oldest heart tree, its very presence radiating an ancient power. Theon could only hope the allies he sought still lingered in this sacred, timeless place. The serene atmosphere shattered violently as Theon and his party cautiously stepped into the clearing dominated by the colossal heart tree. A searing ball of fire, trailing smoke and crackling with raw energy, suddenly hurtled towards them from the shadows beneath the ancient boughs. The air crackled with heat, and the suddenness of the attack sent a ripple of panic through the assembled wildlings and wolfpack alike. Theon Stark POV. Their heads snapped upwards, eyes scanning the dense foliage of the ancient heart tree's lower branches, searching for the source of the sudden, fiery assault. When the figure finally revealed itself, perched with an almost unnatural stillness amidst the gnarled limbs, a wave of stunned disbelief washed over Ragnar's wildlings and Theon's wolfpack alike. Jaws dropped, eyes widened in utter astonishment, and a collective gasp escaped their lips except for Theon. A small, lithe figure perched amidst the ancient branches, its skin the color of moss and bark, its eyes glowing with an eerie green light, was the source of the fiery projectile. It was undeniably one of the children of the forest. Ragnar, standing beside me, his weathered face etched with utter disbelief, finally found his voice, his usual booming tone reduced to a hushed whisper. "By the old gods, what in the frozen hells am I seeing, Magnar Wolf?" He stared, transfixed, at the small, otherworldly being in the tree. That's one of the wee folk. The legends, they're real." I confirmed, my gaze fixed on the child in the tree. Before I could elaborate, the small figure spoke, its voice like the rustling of leaves in a forgotten tongue, yet somehow understandable. "Why have you come here, Fate Breaker?" A chill ran down my spine at the title. Did they know of my other life? "I am here to speak with you," I replied, my voice steady despite the tremor in the air, and with the three-eyed raven. The child's glowing green eyes narrowed, studying me with an ancient intensity. After a long, silent moment, she moved with an uncanny grace, leaping from branch to branch before landing silently on the forest floor. "Follow me," she instructed, her voice barely a whisper, yet carrying an undeniable authority. We followed the child of the forest, her movements swift and silent, as she led us to the base of the colossal heart tree. There, concealed by a curtain of thick, ancient roots, was the entrance to a cave. The air within was cool and damp, carrying the scent of moss and something else, something ancient and earthy. Deeper we ventured, the flickering light of our torches casting dancing shadows on the cave walls, which were adorned with strange, spiraling carvings. The passage twisted and turned, leading us further into the heart of the earth, until we emerged into a vast cavern. In the center, amidst a tangle of pale, root-like tendrils that pulsed with a faint, inner light, sat a man. His skin was as white as the weirwood roots themselves, and his eyes, when they opened and fixed upon us, held the weight of centuries. As we approached, he slowly rose, his movements stiff and deliberate, as if his limbs were more accustomed to the embrace of the ancient wood than to the act of standing. This had to be him. The three-eyed raven. The man's gaze, ancient and knowing, settled upon me. I am the three-eyed raven, he stated, his voice a low, rustling murmur, like the wind sighing through the leaves of the weirwood. Curiosity gnawed at me. What were you called before you became the three-eyed raven? A faint, almost melancholic smile touched his pale lips. Before the weight of ages settled upon me, before my sight transcended the mortal realm, I was known as Thormir. One of the free folk, like Ragnar beside you. He gestured towards the Wildling King with a nod. But that was a lifetime ago, a self I shed as a snake sheds its skin. I am not Thormir anymore. His gaze sharpened, focusing intently on me. But enough of my past. The threads of time have become tangled since your arrival, Fate Breaker. Many paths have diverged. What was once certain is now shrouded in mist. I can no longer say with unwavering certainty whether the prophecies will unfold as they once were foreseen. I met his gaze, a flicker of understanding in my own eyes. Prophecies are fickle things, old man. They twist and turn, finding their own way. What is meant to happen will happen, whether you see it clearly or not. Our choices may alter the path, but the destination often remains the same. The three-eyed raven's ancient eyes, like pools reflecting a starlit sky, fixed on me. You wish for us to come with you? He murmured, his voice echoing softly in the cavern. I replied, my voice firm, unwavering in my conviction. The long night is coming. The dead march. We need every ally we can find, every source of ancient power. The children of the forest, your knowledge, your magic, it could be the key to our survival. A small figure stepped forward, her skin like woven leaves, her eyes glowing with a fierce, emerald light. It was Leaf, the leader of the children of the forest who had guided us here. Her voice, though soft, held a sharp edge of protest. Why should we come with you, Fate Breaker? Beyond the wall lies the realm of men. For centuries, your kind has hunted us, felled our sacred trees, driven us into hiding. Why would we willingly walk into the jaws of the same beast that seeks our extinction? We found sanctuary in the shadows, why should we abandon it for the uncertain promise of your protection? Centuries ago, I conceded, my voice low but earnest, meeting Leaf's intense gaze. But the world is changing. The old grudges, the old wars between our peoples, they pale in comparison to the threat that now looms. The dead do not discriminate between human and child of the forest. They will consume us all. We are facing an enemy that has slept for millennia, a darkness that could extinguish all life in Westeros. We need your knowledge, your magic, the very things that made you retreat into hiding. Staying here, isolated, will not protect you when the icy tide washes over the wall. Leaf's emerald eyes narrowed, studying me with an ancient suspicion. And what guarantee do we have of your protection? Men are fickle, their promises as fleeting as the summer snows. Once the threat of the dead has passed, what will prevent you from resuming your hunt? My word, I stated firmly, my gaze unwavering. The word of House Stark. We have always honored our alliances. This is not a temporary truce born of fear, Leaf. This is about survival. If we fall, you fall with us. If we stand together, we have a chance. I understand your fear, the scars of the past run deep. But I am asking you to look beyond that, to see the greater danger. We need to learn from you, to understand the old magic, the ways to fight this enemy that we have long forgotten. Staying hidden is no longer an option. The darkness is coming for everyone. Ragnar stepped forward, his presence a solid weight beside me. Magnar Wolf speaks true, little one. We free folk have warred with the north for generations. But we see the cold wind rising. We see the dead walk. Old hates mean nothing when the ice dragon breathes. We're bent in the knee to fight this. And if the Starks break their word after, well, we'll deal with that then. But for now, survival's the only fight that matters. Leaf remained silent for a long moment, her gaze shifting between me, Ragnar, and the three-eyed raven, who watched with an ancient, knowing stillness. The fate of a fragile alliance hung in the balance, weighed against centuries of fear and mistrust. You called me Fate Breaker, I reiterated, my voice resonating with conviction in the cavern's stillness. Then hear this, Leaf. Through the long and bloody history of House Stark, there has never been a lord of Winterfell who broke his word. Our oaths are as binding as the ice that forms our northern lands, as enduring as the ancient stones of our keep. I, Theon Stark, give you my solemn vow. As long as there is a Stark ruling in Winterfell and the blood of the first men flows through our veins, no harm will come to you or your people at the hands of the North. You will have our protection, our respect. Your ways will be honored. This I swear before the old gods, and by the memory of my ancestors who forged alliances with your kind in the dawn of time. Leaf remained silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on me, unwavering. Her emerald eyes seemed to peer into the very depths of my soul, searching for any hint of deceit or falsehood. The air in the cavern crackled with anticipation, the fate of a potential alliance hanging precariously on her decision. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a slow nod rippled through her small frame. Very well, Fate Breaker, she said, her voice barely a whisper, yet carrying the weight of her people's decision. We will come with you. We will lend our knowledge and our skills to your cause. But your oath, remember your oath, Stark. The survival of my people rests upon it. Call me Theon, I replied, a small measure of relief washing over me. The first hurdle had been overcome. And how much time do you and your people require to prepare to move? We do not carry the burdens of men, Leaf replied, her gaze steady. Our preparations are swift. We can depart with the rising of the sun on the morrow. Will you be joining us on this journey, three-eyed raven? I asked, turning towards the ancient being who remained near the base of the weirwood roots. His ancient eyes, milky white yet seeming to see beyond the confines of the cave, settled upon me. I, he murmured, his voice a low rustle. The roots hold wisdom, but the branches reach towards the changing winds. My place is now with you, in the unfolding of what is to come. A sense of profound significance settled in the cavern. With the three-eyed raven's ascent, a powerful ally had joined our cause. True to Leaf's word, the children of the forest moved with an almost ethereal efficiency. Small, lithe figures flitted through the shadows, their movements silent and purposeful as they gathered what little they carried. There were no material possessions in the human sense, but rather small pouches of herbs, intricately carved wooden tools, and smooth stones that seemed to hum with a faint energy. The air in the cave shifted from one of tense negotiation to one of quiet, determined preparation. The journey south, with these ancient allies, was about to begin. 2 comments 0 vote. Castle Black. 38 AC. Castle Black. Third person POV. A full moon had waxed and waned since Theon Stark concluded his parley with the three-eyed raven and the children of the forest. Within the great hall of Castle Black, a tense anticipation hung in the air, thick as the northern fog that sometimes clung to the wall's icy face. Every lord of the north, summoned had gathered within these ancient, soot-stained walls. Lord Torrhen Stark, his face a roadmap of winter's hardships and years of stern leadership, sat at the high table, the weight of his lineage and the current crisis etched into his every line. To his right sat his son, Brandon Stark, his features sharp and watchful, beside him his own son, Jon Stark, a young man bearing the serious demeanor of his house. To Torrhen's left sat the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, his dark attire a stark contrast to the furs and leathers of the assembled lords, his expression a carefully guarded neutrality. Beside him stood the First Ranger, his weathered face and keen eyes reflecting years spent patrolling the treacherous lands beyond the wall. The fate of the North, and perhaps more, rested on the words that would be spoken within these hallowed halls. Lord Torrhen Stark rose from the high table, his movements slow but carrying the weight of his authority. The scraping of wood against stone as his chair shifted echoed through the hall, drawing the attention of every lord and bannerman present. A hush fell over the assembled company, their gazes turning towards the aging patriarch of House Stark. My lords, Torrhen began, his voice resonating with the deep timbre of the North, a sound that had commanded respect for decades. Word has reached us of a new power risen beyond the wall. A man calling himself a king, who has gathered at least 100,000 wildlings under his banner. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle upon the assembled lords, their faces a mixture of concern and grim determination. The air in the hall grew heavy with unspoken anxieties. After a long moment, allowing the implications of this news to sink in, Torrhen continued, his voice gaining a steely edge. The North has endured countless threats from beyond the ice. We have bled and we have suffered, but we have also grown stronger, stronger than we have been in centuries, united under the banner of the direwolf. And we will continue to endure. Brandon Stark, his son and heir, rose to stand beside his father, his gaze sweeping across the assembled lords. I, Brandon declared, his voice ringing with the fierce pride of the North. Let this Wildling King and his horde come. Let every lord here recall the tales of our ancestors, the battles fought and won against those who dared to trespass upon our lands. We have faced greater numbers before, and we have broken them. Then, Jon Stark, his youthful face set with a determined resolve, spoke, his voice carrying a surprising strength. Grandfather speaks true. Even if another 10 kings beyond the wall raise armies of 100,000 each, they will find the North a frozen hell, a land that will break them before they break us. A murmur of agreement rippled through the hall, spreading from lord to lord. Heads nodded, fists clenched, and a collective resolve hardened their features. The ancient pride of the North, the unyielding spirit forged in ice and snow, began to burn brightly in the faces of the assembled lords. They had faced the Wildlings for millennia, and they would face this new threat with the same unwavering defiance. Lord Manderley, his considerable girth not hindering the force of his voice, boomed, "I, Lord Stark. Let them come. We shall feast them with steel and drown their sorrows in the icy waters of our bogs. The fat landers may doubt our strength, but the Wildlings know better. They've tasted the bite of the North before, and they'll find it even sharper now." Lord Mormont, fierce spirit of a seasoned warrior, stood tall and declared, his voice ringing with unwavering conviction, "House Mormont will stand with Winterfell. We have held the Bear Islands against Ironborn and Wildling alike. Let this new king learn that the North remembers, and we do not yield." Lord Karstark, his expression grim and unforgiving, added, "The Wildlings have spilled Karstark blood for generations. Let them come south. We will meet them with fire and fury, and for every drop of our kin they have taken, we shall take 10 of theirs." Lord Umber, his voice a thunderous roar that shook the very timbers of the hall, slammed his fist on the table. "Aye, my lord, let the Wildlings break themselves against our lines. We will grind them into the dust and scatter their bones to the four winds. The North will not be cowed." Lord Glover, his features stern, nodded in agreement. "Lord Stark speaks true. We have defended these lands for millennia. This Wildling King will find no welcome here. We will meet him at the gates and drive him back into the frozen wastes from whence he came." Lord Torrhen Stark surveyed the fervent faces of his bannermen, the echoes of their defiant pronouncements still ringing in the hall. He raised a hand, his weathered features etched with a weariness that belied his strong words. "Aye, my lords, your spirit warms my old heart," he said, his voice softening slightly, the fire in his eyes dimming to a more somber glow. "The strength of the North is undeniable. But I ask you now, until when will these endless fights continue? How many more of our brothers, our sons, shall fall in the snow, their blood staining the white ground crimson in these ceaseless clashes beyond the wall?" A heavy silence descended upon the hall, the fervor of their earlier pronouncements momentarily quelled by the stark reality of the cost of war. A heavy silence descended upon the hall, the fervor of their earlier pronouncements momentarily quelled by the stark reality of the cost of war. Then, Brandon Stark, his features thoughtful, yet firm, stepped forward. "Father speaks wisely. We have the strength to fight, yes. But at what cost? How many more northern lives will be extinguished in this endless cycle of raids and retaliation? I say, my lords, perhaps it is time we consider a different path. Perhaps it is time to make peace with them." A chorus of indignant voices erupted throughout the hall. Lord Umber roared, his face turning a shade of apoplectic purple. "Peace with Wildlings? Have you lost your senses, Brandon Stark? They are savages, raiders, cannibals. They have spilled northern blood for centuries. Peace is a fool's dream, achievable only through the edge of a sword driven through their black hearts." Lord Mormont's voice, though smaller in volume, carried the sharp sting of steel. "Make peace with those who steal our harvests and slaughter our families? Never. They understand only strength, only the cold kiss of northern steel. To offer them peace is to invite further aggression, to show weakness where only iron will suffices." Lord Karstark's expression darkened, his eyes blazing with bitter memory. "Peace. They butchered my kin. The only peace I desire with a Wildling is the silence of their graves." Lord Glover shook his head in disbelief. "Brandon Stark, with all due respect, your words are naive. These are not men we can reason with. They are animals, driven by hunger and a lust for what is ours. Peace is an illusion. Survival lies in vigilance and strength." Even Lord Manderley, usually jovial, frowned deeply. "While I yearn for fewer graves to fill, Brandon Stark, I cannot fathom trusting the word of a Wildling. Their allegiances shift with the wind and their promises are as brittle as winter ice. We offer peace, they will see weakness and exploit it." The hall was a cacophony of protest, each lord recounting tales of Wildling cruelty, each voice echoing generations of ingrained hatred and mistrust. The very idea of seeking peace with the traditional enemy was anathema to their northern pride and their long-held beliefs. Brandon Stark stood amidst the storm of their dissent, his expression unwavering, but the weight of their collective outrage was palpable. A thunderous voice boomed through the hall, cutting through the cacophony of protest like the crack of winter ice. Silence. Lord Torrhen Stark, his face a mask of stern authority, had risen once more, his aged frame radiating an unexpected power that instantly commanded attention. The assembled lords, startled by the sheer force of his command, fell into a grudging silence, their muttered protests dying in their throats. Torrhen's gaze, sharp and unwavering, turned towards the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, who sat stoically at his left. "Lord Commander," Torrhen's voice, though still carrying a hint of its earlier thunder, now held a measured weight. "Remind these impassioned lords. What are the ancient vows that bind you and your black brothers to the wall? The Lord Commander, Ethan Glover, a man whose face bore the marks of countless cold nights and grim responsibilities, rose slowly to his feet. His voice, though quiet, carried a weight of solemnity that resonated through the hushed hall. Night gathers, and now my watch begins. It shall not end until my death. I shall take no wife, hold no lands, father no children. I shall wear no crowns and win no glory. I shall live and die at my post. I am the sword in the darkness. I am the watcher on the walls. I am the fire that burns against the cold, the light that brings the dawn, the horn that wakes the sleepers, the shield that guards the realms of men. I pledge my life and honor to the Night's Watch, for this night and all the nights to come. Lord Torrhen Stark nodded slowly, his gaze sweeping across the assembled lords, his expression grave. Realms of men, he echoed, the weight of the words hanging in the air. Not wildlings. No one in their right mind builds a wall of this height, this breadth, for mere raiding parties. Generations of Starks have stood watch on that wall, and the true enemy has always been something far more terrifying than scattered tribes of wildlings. He paused, his gaze hardening. The long night. The darkness that our ancestors fought back in the dawn of days. The reason the wall was built. The reason the Night's Watch was sworn. Lord Torrhen Stark's gaze softened, a flicker of memory crossing his weathered features. Those words, he murmured, his voice taking on a more personal tone, those were the very words my own father spoke to me, the winter I came of age. He didn't speak of wildling raids or petty squabbles beyond the wall. He spoke of the long night, the true darkness that slumbers but never truly dies. He told me that there must always be a Stark in Winterfell, a vigilant eye watching the horizon. He said our house words, winter is coming, are not just a pronouncement of the season, but a timeless warning, a constant reminder to prepare, to always be ready for the true winter that will one day descend upon us all. The weight of Torrhen Stark's words settled heavily in the hall. The lords, their earlier fervor momentarily quelled, exchanged uneasy glances. The ancient warning, the very essence of House Stark, hung in the air, a stark reminder of a threat far greater than any wildling host. The boisterous pronouncements of battle faded, replaced by a thoughtful silence. The mood in the great hall of Castle Black had shifted, the initial defiance now tempered by a sense of foreboding and the chilling echo of winters past and winters yet to come. The true nature of the threat beyond the wall, long dismissed as mere wildling aggression, now loomed large in their collective consciousness. Lord Torrhen Stark sighed, a weariness settling upon his aged features. The long night, he murmured, it may come, or it may simply be the rambling of an old man who has seen too many winters. But remember this, my lords. I stand before you now, a man who once wore a crown. Yet, I bent the knee to the Dragon King, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. I saw the flames that could consume the north, and I chose to preserve our lands, our people. We never broke, even when the Andals cast their eyes upon us, because I knew that war then would have meant the burning of the north. He straightened, his gaze sweeping across the assembled lords. And what has come of that peace? Nearly 4 decades of it. Decades in which our lands have flourished, our harvests have been bountiful. We no longer depend on the whims of the South for their grain. We have grown strong in our own right. He paused, his voice gaining a renewed strength. So I say to you now, let us not be blinded by old hatreds. Let us speak to this king beyond the wall. If he is willing to bend his knee and follow our laws, then let us make peace with him. Let us add his strength, and the strength of his people, to our own. For if the true darkness descends, we will need every sword, every axe, every hand we can muster. A low murmur rippled through the lords seated below the high table. Uncertainty and skepticism clouded their faces as they exchanged hushed words. Lord Manderley, his brow furrowed, leaned towards Lord Glover. Bend the knee, wildlings. Have you ever heard of such a thing? They're as wild as the wolves in the wolfswood. I'll wager they'd sooner freeze to death than kneel before any southern king, let alone us. Lord Mormont, his gaze sharp, addressed Lord Karstark. And what of their raiding? Their savagery? Can we truly trust them to abide by our laws? They've known only the law of the axe for generations. Lord Karstark, his jaw tight, replied, his voice low and bitter, trust a wildling. I'd sooner trust a viper in my bedchamber. They'll promise anything to get south of the wall, and then the bloodshed will begin anew, only this time within our own lands. Lord Umber, his massive frame shifting restlessly, grumbled to Lord Flint, peace with wildlings, it's a fool's errand. They'll steal our food, our women, they'll bring their filth and their chaos into the north. We should meet them at the wall with steel and fire, not open arms. The hall buzzed with their apprehensive whispers, the ingrained mistrust of centuries coloring their every word. The prospect of wildlings kneeling, of a lasting peace, seemed a fantastical notion to these lords who had known only conflict with the tribes beyond the wall. The seeds of doubt had been sown, threatening to undermine Torrhen Stark's cautious proposal. Lord Torrhen Stark raised his voice once more, cutting through the apprehensive murmurs. "My lords," he announced, his tone firm, "I have not spoken of idle hopes. My grandson, Theon Stark, has already journeyed beyond the wall. He has met with this king, and by his words and actions, he has been successful." A ripple of surprise went through the assembled lords. "They will be here, at Castle Black, on the morrow. We will all gather here then, in this very hall, to witness this unprecedented meeting." 3 comments 0 vote. Settlement. 38 AC. Castle Black. The next day dawned cold and crisp, a thin layer of frost clinging to the black stones of Castle Black. A large contingent of northern lords, their banners snapping in the biting wind, had gathered near the massive gates of the wall, their expressions a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. They awaited the arrival of Theon Stark, the young wolf who had dared to venture beyond the ice, and the Wildling King he had supposedly swayed. As the first figures emerged from the vast, white expanse beyond the wall, a hush fell over the assembled lords. But the silence soon gave way to a chorus of astonished gasps and disbelieving murmurs. Lord Manderley, his eyes wide as saucers, sputtered, "By the seven, what in the name of the sea is that?" He pointed a trembling finger at the approaching figures. Lord Mormont, usually stoic, could only manage a hushed, "The tales, they are true." His gaze was fixed on the small, lithe figures moving with an unnatural grace amongst the wildlings. Lord Karstark, his face paling beneath his beard, whispered, "The children of the forest, here. Beyond the wall." Lord Umber, his booming voice reduced to a stunned whisper, pointed towards the towering figures lumbering behind the wildling host. "And, giants. True giants. I never thought to see such a thing in my lifetime." Lord Mormont stepped forward, his usual stern composure momentarily broken by a wide-eyed wonder. "By the old gods," he breathed, his gaze fixed on the approaching figures. "The children of the forest, I never believed the stories. And, are those giants? Truly." Awe and disbelief warred on his weathered face. As the group drew closer, Theon Stark, flanked by Ragnar Lothbrok, stepped forward. He moved with a confident stride, the white direwolf pup, Frost, visible peeking from beneath his cloak. He reached the assembled northern lords, his gaze meeting his grandfather's first. "Grandfather," Theon said, his voice clear and carrying in the crisp air, bowing his head slightly to Lord Torrhen Stark. "Theon," Lord Torrhen replied, his stern face softening with a hint of relief and a flicker of pride. "You have returned, and you have brought unexpected company." His gaze flickered towards Ragnar and then to the children of the forest and the towering giants. Theon then turned to his father, Brandon Stark, offering a respectful nod. "Father." Brandon clapped a hand on Theon's shoulder, his expression a mixture of concern and admiration. "Theon, your journey was eventful, it seems." His eyes darted towards the giants with open astonishment. Turning to his twin, Janos, Theon offered a small, wry smile. Janos. Janos met his brother's gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. "Brother, you certainly have a knack for the extraordinary." His eyes, like those of the other lords, kept drifting back to their unusual companions. Theon then turned to the assembled lords, offering a general nod of greeting. "My lords, I present to you Ragnar Lothbrok, king of those beyond the wall who have chosen a different path. And these," he gestured towards Leaf and the other children of the forest, "are the allies of our ancestors. And," he finished, turning slightly towards the giants, "these are the giants." He then offered a respectful nod to the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, Ethan Glover. "Lord Commander." Lord Commander Glover inclined his head in return, his dark eyes taking in the entire scene with a stoic, yet clearly intrigued, gaze. The air was thick with unspoken questions and a profound sense that the ancient world, long relegated to the realm of myth, had suddenly stepped into the stark reality of the present. "My lords," Theon continued, gesturing towards the small, graceful figure standing beside him, "may I present Leaf, a leader of the children of the forest. They have agreed to join us and lend their ancient wisdom and skills to our cause." A fresh wave of murmurs rippled through the assembled lords, their astonishment deepening at this open alliance with the mythical beings of the woods. Then, Theon turned towards the towering giant who stood a head above even the tallest wildlings, his massive club resting on the ground beside him. "And this," Theon announced, his voice carrying a note of respect, "is Magmar Tun Doeg, Magnar of the Giants. He and his people have also agreed to stand with the north against the coming darkness." A collective gasp swept through the ranks of the northern lords. The sight of a true giant, standing as an ally, was beyond anything they had ever conceived. The air crackled with disbelief and a dawning sense of the monumental changes unfolding before their very eyes. Lord Torrhen Stark, his gaze sweeping over the unprecedented assembly before him, the Wildling King, the legendary children of the forest, and the towering giant, finally broke the stunned silence. A deep, thoughtful frown creased his brow. Indeed, he rumbled, his voice carrying the weight of his years and the gravity of the situation. It seems we have much to discuss. Let us move inside, my lords. The main hall awaits. He gestured towards the imposing gates of Castle Black, his eyes conveying the urgent need for counsel and understanding in the face of these extraordinary developments. Once within the great hall of Castle Black, the initial awe and astonishment of the northern lords gave way to a torrent of questions directed at Theon. The hall buzzed with a cacophony of inquiries, each lord eager to understand the impossible alliance that had seemingly materialized before their very eyes. Lord Manderley, his face still flushed with disbelief, boomed, "Lord Theon. By the gods, children of the forest. Giants. What manner of sorcery is this? What happened beyond the wall?" Lord Mormont, his usual stoicism replaced by a keen curiosity, pressed, "The tales say the children vanished centuries ago. How did you find them? What are their intentions?" Lord Karstark, his voice still tinged with suspicion, demanded, "And the giants? They are creatures of destruction, of chaos. How can we possibly trust them?" Lord Umber, his massive frame leaning forward intently, asked, "Did they fight you? Did you bend them to your will? How did you convince such beings to follow you?" Theon, standing amidst the throng of questioning lords, raised his hands slightly, a gesture for calm. "My lords, one moment. I understand your astonishment, your concerns. What I witnessed beyond the wall was, beyond anything I could have imagined. I will tell you everything." He then proceeded to recount his journey. The parley with Ragnar, the desperate plight of the wildlings fleeing the encroaching darkness, and the unexpected encounter with Magmar Tun-Do-Weg and the giants. He spoke of their agreement, their willingness to fight alongside the North against the true enemy. Then, he detailed his search for the oldest heart tree, his encounter with Leaf and the children of the forest, their initial distrust, and the ancient pact he had sworn in the name of House Stark to secure their alliance. He explained the shared threat they all faced, a darkness that knew no distinction between human, child of the forest, or giant, and the desperate need for unity to stand against it. As Theon spoke, the initial disbelief on the faces of the northern lords slowly began to give way to a dawning understanding, a grudging acceptance of the extraordinary reality he presented. The weight of his words, coupled with the undeniable presence of the children and the giants within their very walls, began to chip away at centuries of ingrained prejudice and fear. As Theon recounted his confrontation with Magmar Tun-Do-Weg, describing the hunt, the desperate struggle, and the final, decisive leap that brought the giant crashing down, a palpable shift occurred in the Great Hall. The initial skepticism and apprehension began to recede, replaced by a burgeoning respect and awe. When he finished the tale, the hall erupted. A thunderous cheer went up from the assembled lords, their voices echoing off the stone walls of Castle Black. Lord Umber's booming laughter shook the very rafters. Lord Manderley clapped his hands with surprising agility, his jovial face beaming. Even the grim Lord Karstark offered a curt nod of approval. Lord Manderley, wiping a tear of genuine admiration from his eye, bellowed, "Lord Theon. By the Kraken's beard, lad, you wrestled a giant to the ground. The songs will sing of this for centuries to come." Lord Mormont, a rare smile gracing his usually stern features, declared, his voice ringing with newfound respect, "Theon Stark, you have shown more courage and foresight than many men twice your age. The North has found a true leader in you." Lord Karstark, his usual grim demeanor softened by a grudging admiration, offered a curt nod. "Aye, mighty wolf, you have the blood of the first men running strong in your veins. To face a giant and prevail, that is a feat worthy of legend." Even the stoic Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, Ethan Glover, offered a rare, almost imperceptible nod of approval. The wall has stood for millennia, guarded by brave men. But perhaps the strength of a wolf is what we truly needed. Lord Umber, his booming laughter echoing through the hall once more, clapped Theon heartily on the back, nearly sending him staggering. "Ha! The mighty wolf. That's a name that'll send shivers down the spines of every wildling and every shadow in the dark. Well fought, lad, well fought. The mighty wolf, 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 the mighty wolf," they chanted, their voices growing in volume and enthusiasm. The very stones of Castle Black seemed to vibrate with the force of their acclaim. The ancient hall shuddered as hundreds of northern voices united in their praise for the young Stark who had not only ventured beyond the wall but had returned with such extraordinary allies, and with a tale of personal courage that had clearly captured their imaginations. The air crackled with a newfound hope and a burgeoning sense of unity. The mighty wolf had returned, and the North stood a little taller that day. As the thunderous cheers for the mighty wolf finally subsided, a more serious atmosphere settled over the Great Hall. Lord Torrhen Stark, his gaze now sharp and focused, gestured towards Ragnar Lothbrok, Leaf, and the towering Magmar Tundo Weg. Now, he said, his voice resonating with authority, we have much to discuss. Let us speak of where your people will settle within the north. Brandon Stark, standing beside his father, offered his counsel. Father, he began, his gaze thoughtful, perhaps the free folk should be settled along the stony shore. It is a vast and somewhat desolate stretch, away from the lands of Umber and Carhold. There is much bad blood between them who have raided those territories for generations. Distance might foster a more peaceful coexistence. Theon then stepped forward, his gaze meeting his grandfather's. And the giants, grandfather, he suggested, might find a purpose near Moat Cailin. Their immense strength would be invaluable in the construction of the canal we have long discussed, and in the much-needed repairs to Moat Cailin itself. It is a strategic location, and their presence there could be a significant boon to the defense of the north. Turning his attention to Leaf, Theon continued, as for the children of the forest, I believe the Godswood at Winterfell would be a fitting place for them to settle. It is a place of ancient power, where the old gods still hold sway. They would be close to the heart of the north, and their wisdom could guide us in the days to come. A detailed discussion ensued, with the northern lords offering their opinions and raising concerns, while Torrhen Stark listened intently, weighing each suggestion. Ragnar, Leaf, and even Magmar Tundo Weg, through Theon's translation, offered their perspectives. Finally, with a tentative agreement reached on the proposed settlements, Lord Torrhen Stark rose. Very well, he declared, his voice carrying a note of finality. The terms are set. Now, let us proceed. The heart tree of Castle Black awaits. The assembled lords, along with Ragnar, Leaf, Magmar Tundo Weg, and the key figures of their respective people, made their way towards the ancient heart tree that stood at the heart of Castle Black. There, beneath its watchful gaze, the lords of the north, one by one, knelt before Ragnar Lothbrok, acknowledging him as a protector of the north in the face of the coming darkness and pledging their fealty in this unprecedented alliance. Ragnar, in turn, swore to uphold the laws of the north and to fight alongside them against the encroaching threat. The air was thick with the weight of history, the ancient vows exchanged under the silent witness of the weirwood, binding two disparate peoples together in a common cause. Beneath the ancient, watchful gaze of the heart tree at the center of Castle Black, a profound and unprecedented ceremony unfolded. Ragnar Lothbrok then knelt, his weathered knee touching the cold stone. I, Ragnar of the Free Folk, he declared, his voice carrying the weight of his people's hopes, bend the knee to the Starks in the north. We have seen the true enemy, and we will not stand alone against it. We will honor your laws, we will fight alongside you, and we will defend the north as if it were our own. Leaf, her small form radiating an ancient wisdom, knelt gracefully before the heart tree. Her voice, like the rustling of leaves in an ancient forest, echoed softly. We, the children of the forest, have walked this land since the dawn of time. We have seen the cycles of ice and fire. We know the true enemy. We bend our knee to this ancient pact. We offer our knowledge, our magic, and our unwavering commitment to stand with you against the long night. We ask only that you honor the pact made, that you protect our remaining groves and respect the ancient ways. She touched the bark of the heart tree with a delicate hand, her brow lowered in solemn bow. Finally, Magmar Tundo Weg, his massive form lowering with surprising reverence, his great knee thudding against the stone, rumbled in the ancient tongue of the giants. Theon translated his words. Magmar Tundo Weg and the giants bend the knee to the Starks in the north. We remember the cold. We will fight the cold. We will help build. We will be strong for you. He then placed a massive hand on the heart tree, his bowed head a powerful symbol of the alliance between the ancient races and the men of the north, all united against the encroaching darkness. The vows exchanged beneath the weeping heart tree sealed a fragile but vital pact, a beacon of hope in the face of the coming storm. Lord Torrhen Stark, his hand resting on the pale, weeping bark, spoke first, his voice resonating with the solemnity of the occasion. By the old gods, he declared, his gaze sweeping over Ragnar, Leaf, and Magmar Tundo Weg, I, Torrhen Stark, Lord of the Winterfell, Warden of the North, accept your pledge to stand with us against the coming darkness. I offer you shelter, land within our borders, and our respect. We ask in return for your loyalty, your strength, and your adherence to the laws of our land. And so it was. Beneath the silent, watchful gaze of the ancient heart tree, a new chapter in the history of the North had been written. The free folk, their long years of wandering and hardship drawing to a close, had pledged their strength and loyalty. The enigmatic children of the forest, guardians of ancient magic and forgotten lore, had emerged from the shadows to stand alongside men once more. And the mighty giants, their earth-shaking power now sworn to the defense of the realm, had joined the ranks of the living. Against the gathering darkness that threatened to engulf them all, the North stood united, bolstered by alliances forged in desperation and hope, a formidable force ready to face the coming storm. He will have many monikers in the future. I would like if you guys gave some suggestions. 2 comments 0 vote. King's Landing 2:39 AC. Red Keep. A year had passed since the somber day King Aegon the Conqueror breathed his last, leaving the Iron Throne to his eldest son, Aenys. The transition had brought with it the inevitable reshuffling of the small council. Lord Tristan Massey, a respected lord from the Stormlands known for his keen legal mind, had been appointed the new Master of Laws. In his stead now sat Prince Maegor Targaryen, who had recently claimed Balerion, the new king's formidable younger brother, a man whose very presence seemed to crackle with barely contained power. Grand Maester Orland remained a constant, his wisdom and counsel still sought amidst the shifting tides of the court. However, the Queen Dowager, Visenya Targaryen, a figure of immense influence and a rider of the magnificent dragon Vhagar, continued to attend the council meetings, her sharp intellect and unwavering opinions a force to be reckoned with in the Red Keep. The realm held its breath, observing the new king and his advisors, wondering what the future held under the reign of Aenys Targaryen. The air in the small council chamber was thick with the weight of royal business. King Aenys Targaryen, a man whose gentle nature often seemed ill-suited to the sharp edges of the Iron Throne, sat at the head of the table, a concerned frown creasing his brow. My lords, and my mother, Aenys began hesitantly, his gaze flitting between his counselors. The Dornish situation, the reports from the Prince of Dorne remain troubling. They chafe under the terms agreed upon by my father. There are whispers of unrest, of old grievances being stirred. Prince Maegor, his broad shoulders hunched forward, his dark eyes narrowed, slammed a gauntleted fist on the table, the sound echoing sharply in the chamber. Troubling. They spat on my father's peace, brother. They murdered his kin. The only language the vipers of the south understand is fire and blood. Send me, Aenys. Let me take a host and remind them of the price of defiance. Grand Maester Orland, his voice calm and measured, a stark contrast to Maegor's fiery pronouncements, stroked his long white beard. Patience, Prince Maegor. King Aegon understood the cost of war with Dorne better than any man. We must tread carefully. Perhaps a royal envoy, bearing assurances of his grace's good intentions. Queen Dowager Visenya Targaryen, her silver hair braided with threads of gold, her violet eyes sharp and assessing, cut in, her voice like the rasp of dragon scales. Good intentions are often mistaken for weakness, my son. The Dornish have always been proud and stubborn. Maegor speaks with a certain pragmatism. We must show them that the dragon's teeth have not been dulled. Lord Tristan Massey, the Master of Laws, leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. Your Grace, perhaps a more nuanced approach is required. While a show of force might incite further rebellion, ignoring their grievances could also prove perilous. I propose we dispatch a delegation, not just with assurances, but with a willingness to listen to their concerns and seek a mutually acceptable solution within the framework of the peace treaty. Aenys sighed, running a hand through his silver gold hair. A delegation, yes, perhaps that is the wisest course. But who should we send? Someone who commands respect, yet also possesses the patience for delicate negotiations. Orys Baratheon, the hand of the king, a man whose booming voice and straightforward manner often cut through the subtleties of courtly intrigue, turned his attention towards the master of whispers, Quentyn Corhys. Corhys, a gaunt man with eyes that seemed to absorb every shadow and a network of informants that stretched across the 7 kingdoms, sat quietly at the table, observing the interplay of the other council members. Corhys, Orys began, his voice loud and direct, brooking no nonsense. You've been quieter than a Dornishman in the snow today. Spill it. What are your little spies chirping about in the rest of the realm? Forget the sand snakes for a moment. What's brewing in the Stormlands, the Reach, the Westerlands? Any lords getting ideas above their station? Any common folk grumbling louder than usual? Quentyn Corhys, the Master of Whispers, finally stirred, his gaze flicking from Orys Baratheon to King Aenys and then around the small council chamber. His voice, when it came, was soft and raspy, like the rustling of dry leaves, yet every word carried a chilling weight. My lord hand, Corhys began, his eyes never quite settling on any one person for too long, the whispers are varied. From the Westerlands, Lord Tybalt Lannister remains firmly in control, though there are murmurs of his ambition for greater influence at court, now that the strong hand of the conqueror is gone. He paused, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his thin lips. In the Reach, the fertile lands remain prosperous, yet the shadow of the Tyrell's rapid ascent still casts a long shadow. Some of the older houses grumble about their perceived slighting, though no open defiance has yet bloomed. Cora's gaze flickered towards the Queen Dowager. From the Stormlands, your own vassals, Lord Hand, remain loyal, though there are concerns about the increasing number of Dornishmen traveling north along the Kingswood. Their intentions remain unclear. He then turned his attention to the Riverlands. The Riverlands, as ever, remain a tangled web. Lord Tully holds Riverrun, but old grievances between the various houses still simmer beneath the surface. There are whispers of bandits along the borders, preying on trade routes, though whether this is mere lawlessness or something more organized remains to be seen. Finally, his gaze settled briefly on King Aenys. And in the Vale, Lord Arryn remains a staunch supporter of the Iron Throne, though the isolation of the Eyrie often breeds its own unique brand of pride and independence. They watch the happenings in the south with a wary eye. Quentyn Corhys steepled his thin fingers, his gaze now troubled. Your Grace, he continued, his raspy voice taking on a more concerned tone. It is the north that troubles me most. While I can relay tidings from every other corner of the Seven Kingdoms, the squabbles in the Stepstones, the harvest reports from the Westerlands, even the latest fashions from King's Landing itself, from the vast expanse north of the Neck, there is a distinct silence. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the council. My usual channels, the merchants, even the less savory elements who ply their trade in the northern ports, their reports have become thin, fragmented. They speak of a great influx of people moving south through the Neck, wildlings in numbers unseen before, yet organized, almost purposeful. They speak of strange alliances, whispers of giants, and children of the forest moving openly. But from within the north itself, from the lords and their keeps, from Winterfell, my spies have fallen silent. It is as if a great, silent snow has fallen, muffling all sound and obscuring all paths. This lack of information from the north is more unsettling than any tale of rebellion in the south. A skeptical murmur rippled around the small council chamber. Grand Maester Orland raised a questioning eyebrow. Giants, Master Corhys, and the children of the forest. These are creatures of myth and legend, tales told to frighten children. Surely, even your network of whispers can be misled by fanciful rumors brought south by superstitious merchants. Prince Maegor snorted derisively. Giants. Ha. Next you'll be telling us the others have returned. Wildling boasts and old wives' tales are hardly reliable intelligence. Even Orys Baratheon, usually more pragmatic, frowned. While the silence from the north is concerning, Corhys, are you certain your informants haven't simply been overwhelmed by this influx of wildlings? Giants and the children, it strains credulity. Queen Dowager Visenya, however, regarded Corhys with a keen, almost predatory interest. The north has always been a land apart, holding to its ancient ways. Perhaps these legends hold more truth there than we in the south understand. This silence you speak of, coupled with these unusual reports, it warrants further investigation, at the very least. King Aenys, looking troubled, leaned forward. Master Corhys, do you truly believe these tales of giants and the children? He seemed genuinely perplexed and a little frightened by the implications. Quentyn Corhys inclined his head slightly, his gaze flickering across the skeptical faces of the small council. Your Grace, my lords, he replied, his voice retaining its soft, raspy quality, I cannot claim to know the absolute truth of these matters. Giants and the children of the forest, they are indeed the stuff of legend in the south. However, the consistency of these unusual reports from the north, coupled with the unsettling silence from my established sources, gives me pause. It is not the sort of fanciful tale one hears once or twice, it is a recurring theme in the fragmented information that reaches us. He paused, his gaze settling briefly on Queen Dowager Visenya. No, I cannot stand here and swear that giants roam the northern lands and the children of the forest walk openly. But neither can I dismiss these whispers entirely, especially given the lack of reliable information from the north itself. Therefore, Corhys concluded, I will dedicate my resources to investigating these claims. I will seek out more reliable sources, send trusted agents north, and endeavor to pierce this veil of silence. Only then can we ascertain the truth of what is happening beyond the Neck. See to it then, Master Corhys, King Aenys said, a hint of relief in his voice that the unsettling topic would be investigated further. Orys Baratheon nodded in agreement, his usual booming tone subdued. Get to the bottom of this northern mystery. The less we know about what's happening up there, the more uneasy I become. Queen Dowager Visenya fixed Corhys with a sharp look. Your methods are your own, Master of Whispers, but I expect answers, and I expect them swiftly. Grand Maester Orland offered a more measured response. Prudence is key, Master Corhys. Gather your information carefully, and ensure its veracity before presenting it to the council. Once the matter of the north had been addressed, Orys Baratheon shifted in his seat. Now then, Corhys, what other tidings do you bring? Surely the realm hasn't fallen completely silent save for the frozen north. He gestured for the Master of Whispers to continue with his report. Quentin Corhys leaned forward, his attention shifting to the more familiar landscape of southern politics. Indeed, my lord hand, he rasped, his voice regaining some of its usual certainty. There are rumblings emanating from Aldtown, and they center on the High Septon. His sermons have become increasingly pointed. He speaks of the abomination of incest sitting upon the Iron Throne, a clear reference to the Targaryen tradition of sibling marriage, and by extension, to his grace himself. A ripple of unease went through the small council. King Aenys shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Corhys continued, his gaze sweeping across their faces. More concerning than the High Septon's rhetoric are the whispers of action. There is talk within the more zealous elements of the Starry Sept, and among some of the more fervent Septons throughout the realm, of a potential formation. They speak of reviving the Faith Militant, the armed wing of the Faith of the Seven, which was disbanded centuries ago. They believe it is their divine duty to cleanse the realm of what they perceive as sin and heresy. He paused, letting the gravity of his words sink in. These are not just idle threats, my lords. There is a fervor building, a sense that the High Septon's words are stirring something deep within the faith. Should the Faith Militant be reformed, it could represent a significant challenge to the authority of the Iron Throne, a power base independent of royal control, fueled by religious zeal and potentially capable of raising armies. A palpable tension gripped the small council chamber. The news of the High Septon's inflammatory sermons and the potential resurgence of the Faith Militant hung heavy in the air. King Aenys, his earlier unease now bordering on alarm, looked to his advisors for guidance. This cannot be allowed to fester, Aenys stammered, his voice losing its usual gentleness. The Faith Militant. We cannot permit it. What must be done? Orys Baratheon's booming voice filled the sudden silence. We nip this in the bud, Your Grace. Send a strongly worded message to the High Septon. Remind him of the Crown's authority and the consequences of inciting rebellion. Perhaps even summon him to King's Landing to answer for his words. Prince Maegor's hand instinctively went to the hilt of his sword. Words are wind, brother. The only language these fanatics understand is steel. Let me take a company of guards and my dragon to Aldtown. A sharp lesson now will save us a bloody war later. Grand Maester Orland cautioned, violence could backfire spectacularly, Your Grace, Prince Maegor. It risks turning the High Septon into a martyr and further inflaming religious fervor. A more diplomatic approach, at least initially, might be wiser. Perhaps a delegation of respected Septons, loyal to the crown, could be sent to reason with the High Septon. Lord Tristan Massey, the Master of Laws, offered a more legalistic perspective. We must also consider the legal ramifications. The Faith Militant was outlawed. Any attempt to reform it is a direct violation of royal decree. We should issue a proclamation reaffirming this and warning against any such action. Perhaps even dispatch royal investigators to Aldtown to gather intelligence on who is involved in these seditious talks. Queen Dowager Visenya, her gaze sharp and calculating, surveyed the council. A multi-pronged approach might be necessary. A firm message to the High Septon, coupled with discreet investigations into the movement's strength and leadership. Maegor's instinct for decisive action is not entirely wrong, but we must choose our moment carefully. A premature show of force could unite the disparate elements within the faith. King Aenys, listening intently to the varying council, finally spoke, a newfound resolve hardening his voice. Very well, Lord Hand, you will draft a royal decree to the High Septon, making clear our displeasure and reminding him of the law. Master Massey, you will dispatch royal investigators to Aldtown. Grand Maester, see if you can identify any influential Septons who might be willing to mediate. And Maegor, stand ready. But for now, we will proceed with caution. We will not repeat the mistakes of the past. We will not allow the Faith Militant to rise again. The council, finally united in their concern, began to discuss the specifics of their respective tasks, the shadow of potential religious conflict looming large over the Red Keep. As the midday sun cast long shadows across the small council chamber, the urgent discussions regarding the High Septon and the potential resurgence of the Faith Militant gradually wound down. The initial flurry of proposed actions had been laid out, and the respective members now had their tasks to undertake. A weary silence settled over the table, the weight of the kingdom's concerns evident in their drawn faces. King Aenys, his earlier resolve seeming to ebb away, sighed softly. Very well, my lords, and my mother. It seems we have enough to occupy us for the nonce. Let us reconvene on the morrow, once Master Corhys has had more time to listen to his birds. Orys Baratheon rose, his usual booming energy somewhat subdued. Aye, Your Grace. A man needs to break his fast. This talk of fanatics has soured my appetite. Prince Maegor pushed back from the table, his expression still thunderous. See that these investigations bear fruit, Corhys. I have little patience for threats to the Iron Throne, be they cloaked in piety or born of Dornish sand. He gave a curt nod to the king and strode from the chamber. Grand Maester Orland gathered his scrolls, his movements slow and deliberate. Wisdom and caution, your grace. Let us pray that cooler heads prevail in Aldtown. Queen Dowager Visenya regarded her son with a piercing gaze. Do not underestimate the power of faith, Aenys. It can move mountains, or topple kings. She rose gracefully and followed Maegor out of the chamber. Lord Tristan Massey, ever the diligent servant, lingered for a moment, exchanging a few quiet words with the king before taking his leave. Finally, only King Aenys and Quentyn Corhys remained. Aenys looked pale and troubled. This High Septon. He speaks such harsh words. Does the realm truly see me as an abomination? Corhys, his voice soft as ever, replied, words are weapons, your grace. But they are not always the truth. It is our task to ensure they do not become the spark that ignites a fire. With that, the Master of Whispers also slipped away, leaving King Aenys alone with his anxieties in the echoing silence of the small council chamber, the midday sun a stark reminder of the troubles that lay ahead. 2 comments 0 vote. Peaceful times. 40 AC. Winterfell. Third-person POV. The biting cold air nipped at exposed skin as Theon and Jon Stark traded blows in the training yard of Winterfell. The ground crunched softly beneath their boots, a stark contrast to the rhythmic clang of steel on steel. Jon, his breath misting in the frigid air, pressed his attack with fierce intensity, his youthful energy driving a relentless flurry of strikes. His brow was furrowed in concentration, every muscle in his body straining with the effort of his assault. Jon's roars, charging forward with an overhead swing aimed at Theon's head. Theon, his expression serene, takes a small step to his left, easily deflecting the blow with his own sword, the force of Jonas's strike carrying his momentum forward slightly. Jonos immediately follows with a quick horizontal slash aimed at Theon's ribs. Theon smoothly brings his sword down in a parry, the two blades meeting with a sharp clang. In the same fluid motion, Theon pivots slightly and delivers a swift, low thrust towards Jonas's exposed thigh. Jonos, reacting quickly, leaps back just as Theon's point reaches him, narrowly avoiding the strike. He uses the momentum to launch a diagonal cut aimed at Theon's shoulder. Theon raises his sword in a diagonal block, meeting Jonas's blade. Instead of simply deflecting, Theon twists his wrist at the point of contact, attempting to hook Jonas's sword and disarm him. Jonos, relying on his raw strength, manages to wrench his sword free from Theon's attempted disarm, though his grip loosens slightly. He follows up with a wild, powerful swing aimed at Theon's side. Theon ducks low, allowing Jonas's swing to pass harmlessly overhead. Simultaneously, he drops his sword lower and executes a swift, sweeping motion with the flat of his blade against Jonas's leading leg, just above the ankle. The unexpected sweep throws Jonos off balance. His footing gives way, and he stumbles forward, his sword arm flailing momentarily. Seeing his opportunity, Theon rises smoothly, his sword now pointing directly at Jonas's chest. Jonos, off balance and disarmed of his momentum, can only stare at the cold steel inches from his heart. Jonos, recognizing the inevitable, lowers his practiced sword and lets out a frustrated breath. Yield, he concedes, his earlier ferocity gone, replaced by a grudging respect. Theon lowers his own sword, his calm expression never wavering. Well fought, brother. Your intensity is commendable, but remember to maintain your balance, even in the heat of the attack. The clang of steel faded as Theon lowered his sword, the tip resting lightly on the snow-dusted ground. Jonos, his chest heaving, dropped his own practice blade with a dull thud. The crisp winter air carried the sound of their ragged breaths. They walked in unison towards a rough-hewn wooden bench that sat against the wall of the training yard, the snow around it having been cleared by diligent stable hands. Theon picked up a skin of water that lay on the bench and offered it to Jonos first. Jonos took a long, grateful draught, the water gurgling down his throat. He lowered the skin, wiping his mouth with the back of his gloved hand. Gods, I thought I had you that time, he said, a hint of frustration still in his voice, though tempered with a grudging admiration. You move like a shadow, Theon. How do you see everything? Theon took the water skin as Jonos offered it back, taking a smaller sip. Years of practice, brother. And perhaps, a different way of seeing. He didn't elaborate, his gaze drifting towards the snow-covered battlements of Winterfell. The early morning sun, though weak, glinted off the ice that clung to the ancient stones. The sparring match was over, but the lessons, as always, lingered in the cold winter air. Jonos leaned back on the bench, a playful smirk spreading across his face, the earlier frustration of the spar already fading. He nudged Theon with his elbow. So, brother, he began, his voice laced with teasing, has there been any interesting parchment arriving from the icy shores of Bear Island lately? Any missive sealed with the sigil of the she-bear? He raised an eyebrow, a knowing glint in his gray Stark eyes. Theon took another slow sip of water, his gaze remaining fixed on the distant battlements. A faint hint of color might have flickered across his cheeks, but his expression remained resolutely neutral. He simply rolled his eyes at Jonas's teasing, offering no verbal response. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken understanding and the familiar camaraderie of brothers. Janos chuckled softly, knowing he had struck a nerve, but respecting Theon's quiet reticence on the matter. The she-bear of Bear Island was clearly a topic Theon preferred to keep to himself, at least for now. Janos, undeterred by Theon's silence, shifted the conversation to more general matters. Did you hear about Lord Manderley's latest endeavor in White Harbor? He asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. Apparently, he's attempting to breed larger, hardier pigs for the winter stores. Says the current stock isn't sufficiently plump for a proper northern feast. Theon finally offered a small smile. I heard whispers. Leave it to Manderley to concern himself with the girth of his swine even with other matters at hand. Speaking of other matters, Janos continued, his tone turning slightly more serious, have you had any further word from the Wildling settlements? Are they holding to their agreements? Thus far, the reports have been stable, Theon replied, his gaze becoming more thoughtful. There have been minor disputes, as expected when two vastly different peoples try to coexist, but nothing they haven't been able to resolve. Ragnar seems intent on keeping his word, and the giants, well, they mostly keep to themselves around Moat Cailin, surprisingly helpful with the canal work. And the children of the forest? Janos inquired, his curiosity evident. Have they integrated at all within the Godswood? Do they interact with the castle folk? Leaf and a few others occasionally venture into the outer yards, Theon explained. Mostly to observe the flow of life here. They are quiet, their ways are not our ways. But they have offered their knowledge of the old ways, of the land itself, to Maester Cassin. He seems both fascinated and utterly perplexed by their understanding of the natural world. They fell into a comfortable silence for a moment, the only sounds the distant calls of the guards on the battlements and the gentle sigh of the wind through the bare branches of the Godswood. Uncle is still grumbling about the free folk on the stony shore, isn't he? Janos said after a while, a hint of a smile returning. Says they're scaring away all the game. Theon chuckled softly. Uncle would grumble if the sun rose in the west. He'll come around. Necessity, as they say, makes strange bedfellows. And we need every hand, every axe, every bit of knowledge we can muster for what lies ahead. The earlier levity in their conversation was now tinged with a shared awareness of the looming threat, a constant undercurrent in all their thoughts in the long winter of the north. As their conversation about the happenings of the north continued, the heavy wooden door to the training yard creaked open, and a figure bundled in furs stepped out into the cold. It was their sister, Lyra Stark, her dark brown hair peeking out from beneath a thick hood, her blue eyes bright and full of energy despite the winter chill. Theon, she greeted, offering him a warm smile. Then, turning to Janos, a playful glint entered her eyes. Janos, she said, her voice carrying a teasing lilt, I've been watching your drills. You seem to have some energy left. How about a round with your little sister? She gestured towards the practice swords stacked against the wall, a challenge clear in her stance. Janos scoffed, though a hint of apprehension flickered in his eyes. Fight you, little sister. Whatever for? He asked mockingly, puffing out his chest slightly. I've already bested Theon this morning. Almost. Surely my skills are far too advanced for a mere girl's practice. He winked at Theon, hoping for some brotherly support. Lyra's smile didn't waver. Oh, I don't know, Janos, she said, her voice dangerously sweet. Perhaps so that mother doesn't hear about your rather frequent late-night visits to Wintertown. Specifically, the establishment with the particularly cheerful serving girls and the surprisingly potent ale. I wouldn't want her to worry about you, would I? Her gaze was unwavering, the playful tone laced with a clear threat. Jonas's bravado deflated like a punctured wineskin. He shot a betrayed look at Theon, who merely offered a small, knowing smirk in return. With a heavy sigh, Janos picked up his practice sword again, the earlier energy of his spar with Theon now replaced by a sense of weary resignation. Fine, Lyra, he grumbled, stepping into the training yard. But if I end up with a bruise the size of a Dornishman's fist, you're explaining it to mother. He hefted the sword, his stance less enthusiastic than before. Come on then, little sister. Let's get this over with. He knew better than to underestimate Lyra. Despite her age, she was quick and surprisingly fierce with a blade. The price of his nocturnal pleasures was about to be paid in sweat and likely a few well-placed strikes. The clang of steel rang out once more in the training yard, though this time the rhythm was different. Janos, initially reluctant, found himself engaged in a spirited bout with Lyra. She was indeed quick and agile, her smaller stature allowing her to dart in and out of his reach, forcing him to rely on his longer reach and strength. He held back somewhat, mindful of not actually hurting her, but Lyra pressed her advantage, her movements sharp and determined. They traded blows for a good while, the winter air filling with their grunts and the scrape of steel on steel. Finally, their stomachs began to rumble in unison, a more pressing concern than sibling rivalry. Lyra, panting slightly but with a triumphant glint in her eyes, lowered her sword. Well fought, brother, she conceded, though the tone suggested she felt she'd held her own quite admirably. Janos wiped a bead of sweat from his brow, despite the cold. You're getting faster, little sister, he admitted grudgingly. But I was clearly holding back. Theon, who had watched their spar with an amused expression, stood up. Excuses will not fill empty bellies. Midday meal awaits. Let's see what delights the kitchens have conjured today. With a mutual agreement that further sparring could wait, the three Starks sheathed their practice swords and headed towards the warmth and aromas emanating from the great hall of Winterfell. The brief clash of steel had worked up an appetite, and the promise of food was a welcome respite from the morning's exertions and the ever-present chill of the northern winter. The great hall of Winterfell was filled with the comforting sounds of a midday meal, the clinking of goblets, the scraping of cutlery, and the low murmur of conversation. Lord Torrhen Stark sat at the head of the long table, his son Brandon to his right, and his good daughter Gillian beside him. The twin grandsons, Theon and Janos, sat across from their sister, Lyra. Brandon Stark cleared his throat, setting down his trencher. Father, he began, his gaze turning towards Torrhen, now that the twins have come of age, I believe we should begin considering betrothal offers. Securing alliances for the future of House Stark is a prudent measure. Torrhen Stark nodded slowly, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Brandon, you speak wisely. It is time we gave serious thought to their marriages. Good matches can strengthen our house considerably. Lyra, who had been quietly eating, suddenly piped up, a mischievous glint in her eyes. Well, grandfather, you might find that Theon has already taken a keen interest in a particular match. Though perhaps not one you have in mind. She glanced pointedly at Theon, a knowing smile playing on her lips. He seems to be spending a considerable amount of time observing a certain she-bear on her icy island. It's only a matter of time before he gets caught in her embrace. Janos, ever quick with a jest, chuckled, leaning back in his chair. Grandfather, don't be surprised if Theon returns one day with a bride who has more fur than silk and a roar that could shake the battlements. Though, I must admit, he added, a playful smirk directed at Theon, a wife who can wrestle polar bears might be rather useful in the coming long night. Gillian Stark, a warm smile gracing her features as she watched the playful banter between her children, chuckled softly. Turning to Janos, she said teasingly, and what of you, Janos? While your brother is braving icy winds for a formidable she-bear, what manner of delicate flower has caught your eye? Or are your affections currently occupied by the cheerful serving girls of Wintertown? She raised a knowing eyebrow, echoing Lyra's earlier implication, a hint of amusement dancing in her eyes. Perhaps we should start looking for a match for you closer to home, before you bring us a daughter-in-law with a penchant for strong ale and late-night strolls. Lyra, not wanting Janos to bear the brunt of their mother's teasing alone, chimed in, her eyes sparkling with amusement. Oh, but mother, don't fret too much about Janos's local interests. There's also been a rather intriguing correspondence with a certain mermaid from White Harbor. Apparently, she possesses a captivating singing voice and a rather extensive knowledge of maritime trade routes. The letters have been quite frequent, and filled with rather flowery prose, if I do say so myself. She winked at Janos, a mischievous grin spreading across her face. Janos's eyes widened in mock horror as Lyra revealed his White Harbor correspondence. Lyra, he exclaimed, throwing his hands up in mock indignation. Mermaid, really, must you exaggerate so wildly? It's a perfectly respectable young woman who happens to reside in White Harbor and possesses a keen interest in poetry. And perhaps a minor involvement in the family's shipping business. It's purely intellectual discourse, I assure you. He shot a pleading look at his parents and grandfather, hoping to salvage his reputation. My sister has a rather vivid imagination when it comes to matters of the heart. Gillian chuckled, a warm and knowing sound that filled the hall. She leaned forward, her eyes twinkling with amusement as she regarded Janos. Oh, really, Janos? Purely intellectual discourse with a White Harbor mermaid, who just happens to know all about shipping. And Lyra's imagination is the wild one. She raised a skeptical eyebrow, a playful smile dancing on her lips. Of course, dear, just as Theon is merely observing a she-bear for purely scientific purposes, I'm sure. Her tone was light and teasing, but the underlying message was clear. She saw right through his attempts at deflection and found it thoroughly amusing. Lord Torrhen Stark observed the playful exchange with a knowing smile playing on his lips. He cleared his throat, drawing the attention back to the matter at hand. Well, it seems my grandsons have already begun to explore their options, he said, his eyes twinkling. However, Brandon, your suggestion remains a wise one. I shall indeed correspond with the lords who have sent betrothal offers. It would be remiss of us not to consider all possibilities, even if certain hearts already seem to be leaning in particular directions. He gave a pointed, yet fond, look at both Theon and Janos, letting them know their youthful inclinations had not gone unnoticed. We shall proceed with diplomacy, as befits the Starks. And perhaps, he added with a chuckle, we shall see which bears and mermaids prove to be the most compelling matches. And with that, the light-hearted banter and the subtle discussions of potential alliances faded into the comfortable rhythm of the midday meal. The Stark family continued to eat, the warmth of the hearth and the familiar company creating a temporary respite from the harsh realities of the northern winter and the looming threats beyond their borders. The future betrothals of the twins remained a topic hanging in the air, a gentle undercurrent to their conversation, but for now, they simply enjoyed the nourishment and the familial bonds that held them together in the heart of Winterfell.